The moment Lorenzo Vieri's hand wrapped around another man's throat in the middle of a crowded restaurant, Evelyn Carter knew her carefully constructed life was over. For 2 years, she'd been invisible, the perfect secretary, the silent shadow. But one lunch meeting, one wrong table, one possessive kiss that tasted like gunpowder and promises, and suddenly she wasn't invisible anymore. She was his. And in Lorenzo's world, that meant she was marked. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The clock on Evelyn's desk read 11:47 a.m. when her carefully ordered world began its descent into chaos. She didn't know it yet. She was too busy color-coding Lorenzo Vieri's schedule for the next quarter, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 2 years learning to anticipate a dangerous man's needs before he voiced them. The office was quiet. That particular kind of quiet that meant Lorenzo was in a meeting 3 floors down. The kind of meeting where men spoke in careful euphemisms and left with either deals or regrets. Evelyn preferred it when he was gone. Not because she disliked him. You didn't work for Lorenzo Vieri for 2 years if you disliked him. You either worshipped him, feared him, or in her case, maintained a professional distance that bordered on art form. But when he was gone, she could breathe. She could exist without the weight of his attention, without the constant awareness that came from working 18 inches away from a man who could ruin lives with a phone call. Her cell phone buzzed. Marcus. Still on for lunch? Bistro Laurent, 12:30? She'd forgotten. Shit. Marcus Chen, her friend from college, was in town for exactly 4 hours between connecting flights, and she'd promised him lunch 3 weeks ago. Evelyn glanced at Lorenzo's schedule. His meeting was supposed to run until 2. She'd be back by 1:15, plenty of time. See you there, she typed back. She grabbed her purse, told Janet at the front desk she'd be back in an hour, and stepped into the elevator before she could second-guess herself. This was fine. This was normal. Normal people took lunch breaks. Normal people met old friends at overpriced bistros and caught up on life. Evelyn Carter was very good at pretending to be normal. Bistro Laurent was the kind of place that served $12 cappuccinos and made you feel underdressed even in business attire. Evelyn spotted Marcus immediately, still tall and lanky, still wearing glasses that were slightly too large for his face, still grinning like someone had just told him the world's best joke. Evie! He stood, nearly knocking over a water glass. You look exactly the same. How is that possible? You need better glasses, she said, but she was smiling as she hugged him. Marcus smelled like airport coffee and the same cologne he'd worn since sophomore year. Safe, familiar. They ordered some kind of salad for her, pasta for him, and fell into easy conversation. Marcus worked in tech now, something involving algorithms she didn't pretend to understand. He was engaged. His fiancée was a pediatrician. They had a dog named Algorithm, which Evelyn thought was either very clever or very stupid. And you? Marcus asked, twirling pasta around his fork. Still working for that corporate giant you mentioned? What was it, Vieri Enterprises? Still there. You like it? Evelyn considered her answer. Did she like working for a man whose business dealings existed in the gray spaces between legal and lethal? Did she like being so good at her job that she'd become indispensable to someone who terrified most people he met? It's interesting, she said finally. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting, Marcus laughed. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Just a friendly gesture, the kind of casual touch that meant nothing. I worry about you sometimes, Evie. You always did disappear into your work. Are you happy? She opened her mouth to respond, but the words died in her throat. Because Lorenzo Vieri had just walked through the bistro's front door. Later, Evelyn would realize she should have known something was wrong the moment she saw him. Lorenzo didn't do casual lunch spots. He didn't do unscheduled appearances. And he definitely didn't look like that. Tie loosened, jaw set, eyes scanning the restaurant with the focused intensity of a predator who'd caught a scent. But in that moment, all she could think was, his meeting wasn't supposed to end until 2. Their eyes met across the restaurant. Something flickered in his expression, something she'd never seen before and couldn't name. He started walking toward her table. Evie? Marcus was looking at her strangely. You okay? You just went pale. She couldn't answer. because Lorenzo had reached their table, and up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight flare of his nostrils. He looked at Marcus's hand, still resting on hers from moments ago. When his gaze lifted to her face, Evelyn felt something cold slide down her spine. "Mr. Vieri," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "I didn't expect your meeting ended early." His voice was quiet, controlled, which was worse than if he'd been angry. Lorenzo's anger was loud, explosive, over quickly. This was something else. "I went to the office. Janet said you were at lunch." "Yes, This is Marcus Chen, an old friend from college. Marcus, this is Lorenzo Vieri, my employer." She watched Marcus's face as recognition hit. Everyone knew the name Lorenzo Vieri, even if they didn't know exactly what he did. Real estate development, the newspapers said. International investments. The kind of empire that came with rumors and speculation and occasional federal investigations that never quite stuck. Marcus pulled his hand back from hers like he'd been burned. "Mr. Vieri, it's an honor." Lorenzo didn't acknowledge him. He was still looking at Evelyn, and there was something in his eyes that made her pulse kick up. Not fear, exactly, but awareness. The same awareness she spent 2 years carefully suppressing. "We need to talk," Lorenzo said. "I'm having lunch. Now, Evelyn." She'd never heard him use that tone with her before. In 2 years, he'd been demanding, sometimes short-tempered, occasionally impossible, but never like this. Never with this edge that suggested she didn't actually have a choice. Marcus was gathering his things, practically tripping over himself to leave. "I should go anyway. Flight to catch." "It was great seeing you, Evie. We'll catch up another time." He was gone before Evelyn could protest, leaving half his pasta uneaten and $40 on the table that wouldn't cover both their meals. Lorenzo slid into the vacated seat. "What are you doing?" Evelyn's hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against the table. "You can't just—" "Who is he?" "I told you, a friend from college." "Does he know what I do?" "He knows you run Vieri Enterprises. That's all anyone knows." She met his eyes, forcing herself not to look away. "What is this about? Why are you here?" Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, but there was nothing relaxed about the movement. He was studying her the way he studied contracts before he found the loophole, the weak point, the place to apply pressure. "I saw you," he said quietly. "Through the window, holding hands." The absurdity of it hit her first, then the implication. "You followed me." "I came looking for you." "Why?" The question hung between them. Around them, the bistro continued its lunch service. The clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal sounds. A normal world that suddenly felt very far away. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "I don't know." It was possibly the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Evelyn's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She knew she should be angry, was angry actually at the presumption, the interruption, the way he'd scared off Marcus with nothing but his presence. But underneath the anger was something else, something that had been building for 2 years, growing in the spaces between professional distance and the moments when his hand brushed hers, passing documents, when he stayed late, and she stayed later, when he looked at her like he was looking at her now. "I should go," she said. "Back to the office. There's the Shanghai contract to review, and the—" "Evelyn." He said her name like it cost him something. "Do you know what people would do if they knew you mattered to me?" The question stopped her cold. "I'm your secretary." "You're more than that." "I'm not." "You are." He leaned forward, and she caught his scent, expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Whiskey, maybe, or smoke. "You've been more than that for a year, maybe longer. And I've been lying to myself about it because acknowledging it means—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "Means what?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, pulled out his wallet, and dropped $200 bills on the table. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to that controlled, dangerous quiet. "It means you become a target. It means every enemy I have, and Evelyn, I have so many enemies, starts looking at you as leverage. It means I can't protect you from what I've built." "I didn't ask for your protection." "I know." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. That's the problem. He turned to leave. Evelyn watched him take 3 steps toward the door before her mouth opened without permission. Lorenzo. He stopped. Didn't turn around. If I mattered to you, she said carefully, what would that look like? The silence stretched. A waitress passed between them, apologizing softly. Somewhere, someone laughed. Lorenzo turned around slowly. When he looked at her, really looked at her, Evelyn felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the public setting and everything to do with the way his eyes traced her face like he was memorizing it. It would look like me burning down everything I've carefully built to keep you safe, he said. It would look like me being selfish enough to keep you anyway. He closed the distance between them in 4 strides. Evelyn's breath caught as he reached down, his hand cupping her jaw with surprising gentleness. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. It would look, he said quietly, like this. Then he kissed her. If anyone had asked Evelyn Carter what she thought her first kiss with Lorenzo Vieri would be like, not that she'd spent 2 years absolutely not thinking about it, she would have imagined something controlled, calculated. A careful negotiation between 2 people who'd spent years maintaining professional distance. This was nothing like that. This was hunger and possession and 2 years of tension snapping like an overstretched wire. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and she made a sound she'd be embarrassed about later. The kiss tasted like bad decisions and burnt bridges, and she didn't care. Her hands found his shirt, fisting in the expensive fabric, pulling him closer, even though they were in public, even though this was insane, even though a throat cleared loudly nearby. Then again. Lorenzo pulled back slowly, his eyes dark and unfocused. His thumb traced her bottom lip, which Evelyn realized was probably swollen and obviously kissed. Around them, the bistro had gone quiet. She could feel the weight of at least 20 pairs of eyes. Well, Lorenzo said, his voice rough. I suppose that answers your question. Evelyn's face burned. She couldn't look at the other diners, couldn't process what had just happened, could only focus on the fact that Lorenzo was still touching her, his hand now resting against her neck, his thumb against her pulse point where her heart was trying to break out of her chest. People are staring, she managed. Let them. Lorenzo, come with me. It wasn't quite a question. Where? Anywhere, nowhere, I don't care. His hand dropped from her neck, but he caught her hand instead, threading his fingers through hers. I'm done pretending you don't matter. I'm done watching you have lunch with other men and telling myself I don't care. I'm done. You're being irrational. Probably. This is a terrible idea. Definitely. I'm still your employee. There are protocols, HR policies. Lorenzo laughed, actually laughed, a sound she'd heard maybe 3 times in 2 years. Evelyn, I own the company. I am the HR policy. He had a point. She should say no, should remember all the reasons this was dangerous, all the reasons she'd spent 2 years maintaining boundaries. Should think about enemies and targets and the careful life she'd built around not mattering to anyone too much. Instead, she squeezed his hand. Okay, she said. Sets. They didn't go far. Just Lorenzo's car, a black Mercedes that was probably worth more than her annual salary, parked 2 blocks away. He'd dismissed his driver, which should have told her something about his state of mind. Lorenzo Vieri didn't drive himself anywhere. The car smelled like leather and him. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, acutely aware of how small the space was, how close he was. Lorenzo didn't start the engine. He just sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I need you to understand something, he said finally. This isn't going to be easy. Being with me, if that's what you want, it comes with complications. I know what you do. Her voice was steady. I've known for a year, maybe longer. That made him look at her. What do you think I do? I think you run an empire that exists in the spaces where legal and illegal blur. I think you have connections to people the FBI would very much like to talk to. I think the Shanghai contract isn't about real estate development, and the quarterly meetings with the Rossetti family aren't about investment opportunities. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. And you stayed anyway. I stayed anyway. Why? Good question. Evelyn had asked herself the same thing approximately 600 times. The answer wasn't simple, wasn't comfortable. Because you're honest about what you are, she said slowly. You don't pretend to be something else. You don't dress up bad behavior with good intentions. And because, she paused, making herself say it, because I like the work. I like being good at something that matters, even if what matters is morally complicated. Morally complicated, Lorenzo repeated. That's a generous assessment. I'm aware. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city moved around them. Cars, pedestrians, the normal rhythms of a Friday afternoon. Inside the Mercedes, everything felt suspended. I have enemies, Lorenzo said quietly. Real ones. The kind who would hurt you to get to me. The kind who don't have limits or lines they won't cross. If we do this, if you're mine, you need to understand that. You need to accept it. And if I can't? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then we end this now. You go back to the office, we pretend the last hour didn't happen, and I'll find you a new position somewhere else. Somewhere safe. Away from me. Evelyn's chest constricted. You'd fire me? I'd protect you. Even if it means losing you. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. Lorenzo Vieri, who controlled an empire with calculated ruthlessness, would let her go if he thought it was safer. Would remove her from his life even though it clearly cost him something. The realization did something to her, cracked something open. I don't want safe, she heard herself say. Lorenzo's head turned sharply. Evelyn, I don't want safe, she repeated, stronger this time. I've been safe my whole life, says safe job, safe apartment, safe relationships that never mattered enough to hurt. And you know what safe got me? Nothing. 2 years of going to sleep alone and waking up with nothing to look forward to except more work, more distance, more pretending I don't feel anything. What do you feel? The question was soft, almost tentative, nothing like the commanding presence he usually projected. Evelyn turned in her seat to face him fully. I feel like I've been half asleep for 2 years, and then you walked into that restaurant looking at me like I was yours, and I woke up. So no, I don't want safe. I want... She didn't get to finish. Lorenzo kissed her again, and this time there was no audience, no reason to hold back. His hand cupped the back of her head, angling her mouth against his, and Evelyn kissed him back with 2 years of suppressed want. She tasted desperation on his tongue, felt it in the way he pulled her closer, nearly dragging her across the center console. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo pressed his forehead against hers. This is going to change everything, he said. I know. People are going to talk, make assumptions. Let them. There's a gala tonight. Charity auction, very public. Half of high society will be there. If you come with me, if we walk in together, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know. Evelyn's heart hammered. This was it. The moment where she could still retreat, still choose safety, still preserve the careful distance she'd maintained. What time should I be ready? She asked instead. Lorenzo pulled back enough to look at her. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. 7. I'll send a car. I can drive myself. No! The word was firm. Not anymore. If you're mine, you don't take unnecessary risks. My driver, my security, non-negotiable. The presumption should have annoyed her. Instead, it sent heat through her veins. Bossy. You have no idea. He kissed her again, briefer this time. Go home. Rest. Tonight is going to be intense. Intense how? Lorenzo's smile was sharp. You'll see. Evelyn's apartment had never felt smaller. She stood in front of her closet at 6 p.m., staring at a collection of clothes that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. What did you wear to publicly announce you belonged to one of the city's most dangerous men? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Delivery at your door. L. She opened her apartment door to find a garment bag and a small jewelry box. Inside the bag was a dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Deep emerald silk that caught the light like water. The jewelry box held diamond earrings that were definitely worth more than her car. Another text. Wear these. I want you in my colors. Evelyn should have been insulted by the presumption. Instead, she found herself smiling as she typed back, demanding. His response was immediate. "You haven't seen demanding yet." The dress fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised her. Lorenzo noticed everything. Of course, he'd know her exact measurements without asking. The silk felt cool against her skin, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like someone who belonged at a high society gala, someone who could stand next to Lorenzo Vieri and not seem out of place. Someone dangerous. Her phone rang at 6:55, Lorenzo's name on the screen. "The car's outside," he said without preamble. "But I wanted to give you one more chance to change your mind." "Why would I do that?" "Because once we walk into that gala together, there's no going back. My world will become your world. My enemies will become your enemies. Every choice you make will be scrutinized. Every move you make will be watched." Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror one more time. The woman looking back at her didn't look scared. "I'm not changing my mind," she said. She heard Lorenzo exhale, slow and controlled. "Then come downstairs, let's burn it all down together." The gala was held at the Meridian Hotel, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the city's skyline. Evelyn had coordinated Lorenzo's attendance at 100 events like this, knew the guest list by heart, had reviewed the seating arrangements, understood the delicate social hierarchies at play, but she'd never attended one. The car pulled up to the entrance, where photographers clustered like hungry birds. Lorenzo's driver opened her door first, offering his hand. The moment Evelyn stepped out, camera flashes exploded. Then Lorenzo was there, appearing at her side with the fluid grace of a predator. He offered his arm, and when she took it, she felt the solid warmth of him through his tuxedo jacket. "Smile," he murmured. "Let them wonder." They walked the red carpet together, and Evelyn was acutely aware of the whispers starting, the heads turning. She recognized faces from business magazines, society pages, the occasional news article. These people knew Lorenzo. They'd never seen her. Inside the ballroom was everything she'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. What she hadn't expected was the weight of attention. Every conversation seemed to pause as they entered. Every eye tracked their movement. Lorenzo's hand settled on the small of her back, possessive and warm. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They're not important." "Then who is?" "Over there, corner table. That's Victor Rossetti and his wife Natasha. The Rossetti family controls half the shipping on the East Coast. Technically, we're business partners. Actually, we're one bad deal away from open war." Evelyn followed his gaze to a distinguished older man with silver hair and hard eyes. The woman next to him was beautiful in a cold, calculated way. Both were watching Lorenzo with the kind of attention that suggested they'd noticed his entrance. "And there," Lorenzo continued, his hand guiding her slightly to the left, "is Senator Morrison. On the surface, he's a champion of corporate reform. In reality, he's in the pocket of anyone who can afford him. We have an understanding. It's fragile. Anyone else I should know about?" "Everyone. This room is full of people who would smile at me while planning my downfall." He looked down at her, something almost like amusement in his eyes. "Still sure you want to be here?" Before Evelyn could answer, a smooth voice interrupted. "Lorenzo, I didn't expect to see you with a date. How unexpected." Victor Rossetti had approached with the quiet confidence of someone who owned the space he occupied. Up close, he was older than Evelyn had thought, maybe 60, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once and was now just hard. His eyes slid over her with cool assessment. "Victor." Lorenzo's voice was cordial, but Evelyn felt the tension in his body. "Allow me to introduce Evelyn Carter. Evelyn, Victor Rossetti." "The secretary," Victor said, and it sounded like an insult. "I've heard about you. They say Lorenzo's office runs with unusual efficiency." "They're correct," Evelyn said evenly. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And now you're what? A date for the evening? How democratic of you, Lorenzo, mixing business with pleasure." The implication was clear. The insult was obvious. Evelyn felt her spine straighten, but before she could respond, Lorenzo's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side. "Actually," Lorenzo said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "Evelyn is much more than that. She's mine. And Victor, you know how I feel about people disrespecting what's mine." The threat hung in the air between them, barely veiled. Victor's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been concern. My apologies, he said carefully. I meant no disrespect. Of course not. Lorenzo's smile was sharp. Enjoy the evening. It was a dismissal. Victor took it, melting back into the crowd with his wife in tow. Once he was gone, Evelyn exhaled slowly. That was a declaration of war, Lorenzo finished, or close to it. Victor now knows you matter, which means in about 30 minutes, everyone in this room will know. And by tomorrow, everyone in the city will know. Is that a problem? Depends. He turned to face her fully, both hands now resting on her waist. Around them, she could feel the weight of watching eyes, hear the whispers growing. Are you ready for this? Really ready? Evelyn thought about the question, thought about her quiet apartment, her safe life, the version of herself who'd existed yesterday. Then she thought about the way Lorenzo had looked at her in the restaurant, the way he'd kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, the way his hands felt on her now, possessive and protective and perfectly sure. Yes, she said. Something fierce lit in Lorenzo's eyes. Then let's give them something to talk about. He kissed her. Right there, in the middle of the ballroom, with half of high society watching. It was different from the kiss in the restaurant, slower, more deliberate, a statement, not a confession. His hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face up to his, and Evelyn forgot about the audience, forgot about the whispers, forgot about everything except the taste of him and the way her heart was trying to break out of her chest. When he finally pulled back, the ballroom had gone silent. Lorenzo's smile was dangerous as he looked out at the crowd. In case there was any confusion, he said, his voice carrying across the room, Evelyn Carter is under my protection. Completely. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Then he led her toward their table, leaving shocked silence in their wake. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne and carefully worded conversations. People approached their table with congratulations that felt more like reconnaissance, compliments that sounded like threats. Lorenzo handled it all with practiced ease, but his hand never left hers, fingers intertwined on top of the table where everyone could see. Around 10 p.m., Evelyn excused herself to the restroom. She needed a moment to breathe, to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The bathroom was blessedly empty, all marble and soft lighting. She leaned against the counter, studying her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked flushed, alive in a way Evelyn hadn't seen in years. Her lips were slightly swollen from Lorenzo's kiss. The diamond earrings caught the light. She looked like someone who belonged in this world. She looked like someone who'd just made a choice she couldn't take back. The bathroom door opened. Natasha Rossetti walked in, and Evelyn's instincts immediately screamed danger. The woman was stunning. Porcelain skin, sharp cheekbones, the kind of beauty that came from good genes and better surgeons. Her smile was cold. Evelyn Carter, she said, her accent faintly Eastern European. The surprise of the evening. Mrs. Rossetti. Please, call me Natasha. She moved to the mirror, pulling out lipstick with practiced grace. You know, my husband was quite upset by Lorenzo's little display. He considers it disrespectful. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Natasha's eyes met hers in the mirror. Or are you exactly where you want to be? Attached to a powerful man wearing expensive jewelry, playing dress-up in a world you don't understand? The words stung because they hit too close. But Evelyn had spent 2 years working for Lorenzo Vieri. She knew how to mask her reactions. I understand enough, she said evenly. Do you understand that Lorenzo's enemies will now be your enemies? Do you understand that people like my husband will see you as leverage? That your life just became exponentially more complicated and dangerous? Natasha finished her lipstick, capped it with a sharp click. Do you understand that loving Lorenzo Vieri is a death sentence? Then why does Victor do business with him? That earned her a sharp look. Then, surprisingly, a laugh. Smart. Maybe you do understand. Natasha moved toward the door, then paused. A word of advice, girl to girl. Lorenzo is dangerous, but his world is more dangerous. Watch your back, trust no one, and never ever assume you're safe just because you share his bed. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, leaving Evelyn alone with her racing heart. Lorenzo was waiting outside the bathroom when she emerged. He took one look at her face and frowned. What happened? Natasha Rossetti happened. His expression darkened. What did she say? That loving you is a death sentence. Evelyn tried for a smile. Among other things. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He took her hand, leading her away from the ballroom toward a quieter corridor. When they were alone, he pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head. She's not wrong, he said quietly. But Evelyn, I need you to hear this. I will protect you, whatever it takes. Whoever comes for you will have to go through me first. That's not reassuring. That's terrifying. I know. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But it's the truth. You're mine now. That means you're protected by everything I have, everything I am. The Rossettis, the senator, every enemy I've made, they all know that touching you means war, and I'm very good at war. Evelyn pulled back enough to look at him. This is insane. We've known each other for 2 years, and we're just now, we've been dancing around this for 2 years, Lorenzo corrected. Today just forced our hand. Your hand? You forced our hand. You showed up at that restaurant like a jealous asshole? He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I saw you through the window, saw him holding your hand, and something in me just broke. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pretend I didn't care. Couldn't watch you live your life like I wasn't in it. That's not an excuse for acting like a possessive. He kissed her, swallowing whatever insult she'd been about to throw. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with want and something deeper, more dangerous. No, he agreed. It's not an excuse. It's a confession. I'm possessive. I'm jealous. I'm a lot of things you probably shouldn't want in a man. But Evelyn, I'm yours. Completely. And if you'll have me, flaws and violence and dangerous complications included, I swear I will spend every day proving you didn't make a mistake. Her heart did something complicated. That's not how this is supposed to work. We're supposed to date, get to know each other outside of work. Take it slow. Do you want to take it slow? No, she admitted. I want... The lights went out, not just in the corridor, everywhere. The entire hotel plunged into darkness so complete that Evelyn couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. Emergency lights should have kicked in immediately. They didn't. Lorenzo's arms were around her in an instant, pulling her against his chest. Don't move, he breathed against her ear. Don't make a sound. Evelyn's heart hammered. She could hear shouting from the ballroom, the sound of breaking glass, footsteps running, then gunshots. 3 of them, sharp and unmistakable, followed by screaming. Lorenzo! His hand covered her mouth gently but firmly. In the darkness, she felt him move, pulling something from inside his jacket. A gun. Of course he'd brought a gun to a charity gala. The emergency lights finally flickered on, bathing everything in harsh red. In their glow, Evelyn saw Lorenzo's face, no longer the passionate man who'd kissed her moments ago. This was the other Lorenzo, the dangerous one, the one who built an empire in the shadows. Stay behind me, he said, his voice absolutely calm. Do exactly as I say. Understand? She nodded, her mouth dry. They moved back toward the ballroom, Lorenzo slightly ahead, his body positioned to shield hers. The scene inside was chaos. Overturned tables, shattered champagne flutes, people cowering or running for exits. But no bodies. No blood. The shots had been warning fire. Victor Rossetti stood in the center of the room, very much alive, very much in control. He had 4 armed men with him. Not security. Definitely not security. His eyes found Lorenzo across the ballroom, and he smiled. Lorenzo, he called out, we need to talk about territories, about agreements, about respect. This isn't the place, Lorenzo replied, his voice carrying the same eerie calm. You made it the place. When you declared that girl yours in front of everyone. When you decided your personal life was worth risking our arrangement. Victor's gaze slid to Evelyn, still partially hidden behind Lorenzo. Is she worth it? Is she worth a war? Lorenzo's hand tightened on his gun, though he kept it pointed down. Evelyn is non-negotiable. If that's a problem for you, Victor, we can discuss it. But not here. Not like this. When then? Tomorrow. Noon? The usual place. Victor considered this, then nodded. Bring the girl. Let her see what her presence in your life costs. No. The word was absolute. No? Victor's smile sharpened. Then perhaps she's not as important as you claim. Perhaps this is all theater, a play for power. Evelyn felt Lorenzo tense, felt the moment hovering on a knife's edge. She could stay quiet, let him handle this, or she could do what every instinct in her body was screaming at her not to do. She stepped out from behind Lorenzo. I'll be there, she said clearly. Lorenzo's head whipped toward her. Evelyn, I'll be there, she repeated, meeting Victor's eyes across the ballroom. If my presence is the problem, then I should be part of the solution. Noon tomorrow. Where? Victor's expression was unreadable. Then he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise. The warehouse district, Pier 47. Lorenzo knows it. He gestured to his men, who lowered their weapons. Until tomorrow, then. Enjoy what's left of your evening. They left, melting into the crowd of confused, frightened guests. Within moments, actual security appeared, along with police. Lorenzo holstered his gun so smoothly Evelyn almost missed it, then turned to her with an expression that promised a conversation she wasn't going to enjoy. But before he could speak, she pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't, she said quietly. Don't tell me I shouldn't have done that. Don't tell me I put myself in danger. I know what I did, and I'd do it again. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her hand away from his mouth, pressed a kiss to her palm, and said, We're leaving. Now. He didn't let go of her hand as they left the ballroom, left the hotel, left the wreckage of the evening behind. His car was waiting. His driver didn't ask questions, just pulled away from the curb and into the night. In the back seat, Lorenzo finally spoke. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. Which part? All of it. Stepping out, agreeing to come tomorrow, looking Victor Rossetti in the eye like you weren't terrified. Who says I wasn't terrified? Were you? Evelyn thought about it, about the moment she'd stepped from behind Lorenzo, about facing down a man whose reputation preceded him, about volunteering to walk into whatever tomorrow would bring. Yes, she said honestly, but I was also angry. At him for threatening you, at this whole situation, at the fact that my choice to be with you apparently needs to be negotiated like a business deal. Lorenzo pulled her against him, tucking her head under his chin. It's not a business deal, it's war. And tomorrow, you're going to see exactly what that means. I can handle it. I know you can. That's what terrifies me. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Take you home or mine? Yours, Evelyn said without hesitation. I don't want to be alone tonight. She felt him smile against her hair. Good, because I wasn't planning on letting you go anyway. Lorenzo's penthouse was everything she'd expected. Sleek, modern, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, which glittered below like scattered diamonds. He poured them both whiskey, neat, and they stood by the window in silence for a while. I should fire you, Lorenzo said eventually. What? As your boss. I should fire you so we can do this properly, so there's no question of power dynamics or workplace ethics. Evelyn turned to face him. I don't want to be fired. Then what do you want? Good question. What did she want? A simple answer would have been easier, but nothing about this was simple anymore. I want to keep working for you, she said slowly. I want to be part of what you do, the real what you do, not just the sanitized version. I want to go to that meeting tomorrow and prove I'm not a liability, and I want… She paused, making herself say it. I want to be yours, however that looks, whatever that means. Lorenzo set down his whiskey glass very carefully. If you're mine, Evelyn, there's no halfway, no taking it back. You'll be part of my world completely, the good and the very bad. I understand. Do you? He crossed to her, taking her face in both hands. Do you understand that tomorrow you're going to see me negotiate with a man who's had people killed for less than what happened tonight? Do you understand that your presence there puts you directly in the line of fire? Yes. And you're still choosing this? I'm choosing you. Lorenzo kissed her then, slow and deep and thorough, like he was memorizing the taste of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with want and something that looked almost like reverence. Then let me choose you back, he said quietly. Let me protect you, provide for you, give you everything you could possibly want. Let me be selfish enough to keep you, even though it's dangerous, even though it's probably wrong. Evelyn's hand slid up his chest to loop around his neck. Yes. Yes to what? All of it. Everything. Yes. She felt his sharp intake of breath. Then he was lifting her, carrying her through the penthouse to his bedroom, laying her down on sheets that probably cost more than her couch. He followed her down, his weight welcome, his hands careful as they found the zipper of her dress. Last chance to change your mind, he murmured against her throat. Stop giving me chances, she said, pulling him closer. I've made my choice. Later, tangled in his sheets with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Evelyn traced the scars she'd found on Lorenzo's body, evidence of a life lived in danger, of violence survived. Tell me about tomorrow, she said quietly. What should I expect? Lorenzo's arm tightened around her. Victor will test you, try to intimidate you, make you doubt whether you're strong enough for this world. The meeting itself will be tense. Territorial negotiations usually are. He'll probably demand I give up some of the shipping contracts as penalty for tonight. Will you? Depends on what he offers in return, and how reasonable he's willing to be about you. Reasonable meaning? Meaning accepting that you're part of my life now, that you're protected, that touching you means going through me. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then, what if I don't want to be just something you protect? What if I want to be useful, an asset, not a liability? Lorenzo propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. You already are useful. You run my entire corporate life. That's not what I mean. I mean tomorrow. At that meeting. Let me help. Let me be part of the negotiation, not just decoration you bring to prove a point. Evelyn, I'm serious. I've sat in on hundreds of your meetings. I know how you negotiate. I know your tells, Victor's profile, the dynamics at play. Use me. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. This isn't a corporate boardroom. If things go wrong, then they go wrong. But they'll go wrong whether I'm active or passive. At least this way, I'm contributing. A slow smile spread across Lorenzo's face. You're really not afraid of anything, are you? I'm afraid of plenty. I'm just more afraid of being useless. He kissed her forehead. Okay, tomorrow, you're part of it. But Evelyn, the moment I say we're done, we're done. No arguments. Agreed? Agreed. Good. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest. Now sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling safe despite everything that should have terrified her. In Lorenzo's arms, in his bed, in his life. She'd jumped off a cliff today, and the fall was exhilarating. She just hoped the landing wouldn't kill them both. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lorenzo's voice, low and controlled, coming from somewhere else in the penthouse. The clock on the nightstand read 6:47 a.m. She'd slept maybe 4 hours, and her body felt it. A pleasant soreness that reminded her exactly how she'd spent the latter half of the night. She found one of Lorenzo's shirts in the closet, pulled it on, and padded barefoot toward the voices. He was in his study, phone pressed to his ear, staring out at the city as dawn broke over the skyline. When he saw her in the doorway, something in his expression softened. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then ended the call without waiting for a response. You should be sleeping. So should you. I don't sleep much. He crossed to her, hands settling on her waist. Coffee? Please. They moved to the kitchen, and Evelyn watched him pour coffee into expensive mugs with the same precision he brought to everything else. His hair was slightly mussed, and he was wearing pants but no shirt. There were more scars than she'd noticed last night, a puckered mark on his shoulder that looked like an old bullet wound, thin lines across his ribs that suggested knife work. You're staring, Lorenzo said without looking at her. I'm cataloging. Finding anything interesting? Several things. That one on your shoulder. Negotiation gone wrong 4 years ago. The other party thought shooting me would end the conversation faster. He handed her coffee. It didn't. And your ribs? Different negotiation. Same outcome. He leaned against the counter, studying her. Having second thoughts? About which part? The scars? The violence? Or the fact that we're going to meet with a crime boss in, she checked the time, 5 hours? Any of it. Evelyn sipped her coffee, considering. No. Should I be? Probably. Lorenzo's mouth quirked. Most people would be running by now. I'm not most people. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. Not quite concerned, but close. I need to take this. Make yourself at home. There's food, shower, whatever you need. He disappeared back into the study, and Evelyn heard the murmur of his voice, too low to make out words. She finished her coffee, poked through his refrigerator, mostly takeout containers and expensive wine, and eventually wandered back to the bedroom to shower. The bathroom was all marble and glass, the shower big enough for 4 people. She stood under water hot enough to sting, trying to organize her thoughts. 24 hours ago, she'd been Evelyn Carter, efficient secretary, anonymous and safe. Now she was… what? Lorenzo's girlfriend seemed too tame. His lover, maybe, though that felt incomplete. His partner? In what, exactly? When she emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, Lorenzo was sitting on the bed with a laptop open and an expression that suggested the morning's phone calls hadn't been good news. Problem? She asked. Victor moved the meeting, wants it at 2 instead of noon, and he's bringing his son. That's bad? Dimitri Rossetti is 26 and thinks violence is a personality trait. If Victor's bringing him, it's a power play, showing me he's got young blood ready to take over if I push too hard. Evelyn sat down next to him, still in her towel. So what do we do? Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed across his face. We adapt. Show him we're not intimidated. And Evelyn? He reached out, tucking a wet strand of hair behind her ear. If things get heated, if Dimitri starts posturing, I need you to stay calm. Don't react, don't engage, just stay close to me. You think he'll try to provoke me? I think he'll try to prove you're a weakness, that Lorenzo Vieri got soft over a woman. His hand cupped her jaw. Show him you're not a weakness. Show him you're something else entirely. What's that? A strength I didn't know I needed. The words did something to her chest. Before she could respond, Lorenzo's phone buzzed again. He swore softly, checked it, and stood. I need to handle this. There's clothes in the closet that should fit you. I had them brought up this morning. We leave at 1:30. You had clothes brought up? When? While you were sleeping, I made some calls. Of course he did. Evelyn watched him disappear back into the study, then went to investigate the closet. Sure enough, there were new clothes hanging next to Lorenzo's expensive suits. Tailored pants, silk blouses, a charcoal blazer that looked both professional and dangerous. Everything in her size, everything in darker colors that matched Lorenzo's aesthetic. She dressed carefully, choosing the blazer and pants with a deep burgundy blouse that was just bold enough to make a statement. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who could walk into a warehouse meeting with a crime family and not flinch. She hoped that person was actually her. Lorenzo found her an hour later in his living room, reading through what appeared to be a dossier on the Rossetti family that she'd found on his coffee table. He'd showered and changed into a black suit that made him look every inch the dangerous man he was. Research? He asked. Context. Victor has 3 sons, Dmitri, Alexei, and Pavel. Dmitri's the oldest, handles enforcement. Alexei manages the financial side. Pavel is only 19, still in college. She looked up. Why bring the enforcer instead of the negotiator? Because this isn't about negotiation anymore. It's about showing strength. Dmitri's presence is a message. Step out of line and there's someone ready to handle the consequences. So we bring our own message. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. Which is? That I'm not scared. That we're a united front. That whatever they throw at us, we're ready. She stood, closing the dossier. How do I look? He crossed to her slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. When he reached her, his hands settled on her hips, pulling her close. Like you could run an empire, or destroy one. Good. That's what I was going for. He kissed her, deep and possessive, and Evelyn felt heat curl through her despite the danger waiting a few hours away. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. After this meeting, he said quietly, assuming we both survive it, I'm taking you somewhere far away from this city for a weekend. Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can have you without worrying about enemies and territories and everything else. Promises, promises. I mean it, Evelyn. You've been in my world for exactly 1 day, and you're already walking into situations that could get you killed. I need... He paused, jaw tight. I need to know you're okay, that this isn't too much. She pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I'm okay. Scared, yes, but okay. Scared is smart. Scared keeps you alive. Is that what keeps you alive? Fear? Lorenzo's smile was sharp. No. I stay alive through careful planning, extensive resources, and a willingness to be more ruthless than anyone expects. Fear is for people who have something to lose. And now? His hand covered hers on his chest. Now I have something to lose, which makes me exponentially more dangerous. They left the penthouse at 1:30, exactly as planned. Lorenzo's car was waiting, his driver Marcus at the wheel. But this time there was a second car, a black SUV with tinted windows that fell in behind them as they pulled away from the building. Security, Lorenzo explained, seeing her glance back. Marcus is ex-military, and the 3 men in the SUV are people I trust with my life, and now with yours. The drive to Pier 47 took 40 minutes through midday traffic. Evelyn watched the city change around them, from gleaming high-rises to industrial buildings, from crowded streets to empty warehouses. The pier itself was a sprawling complex of corrugated metal and broken concrete, the kind of place where things happened that never made the news. Lorenzo's hand found hers as they pulled up to a warehouse at the far end of the pier. Remember what I said. Stay close, stay calm. And Evelyn... He waited until she looked at him. If I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments. Agreed? Agreed. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Lorenzo didn't call her on it. He just squeezed her hand once, then stepped out of the car. The warehouse was exactly what Evelyn had expected. Cavernous, dimly lit, smelling of oil and rust and something else she couldn't identify. Victor Rossetti was already there, standing near a makeshift table with Dimitri at his side, and 4 armed men positioned strategically around the space. Dimitri was younger than his father, but had the same hard eyes, the same calculating expression. He was tall, muscular, in a way that suggested he spent serious time in the gym, and he looked at Evelyn like she was something he could break. Lorenzo, Victor said. Punctual as always. Victor. Dimitri. Lorenzo's hand settled on the small of Evelyn's back, guiding her forward. You remember Evelyn. How could we forget? Dimitri's voice was smooth, cultured, completely at odds with the violence in his eyes. The woman who started a war. I didn't start anything, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. I just showed up. Dimitri's smile sharpened. And Lorenzo claimed you, in front of everyone, very dramatic. My son thinks you're a distraction, Victor said, a pretty face that's made Lorenzo forget the realities of our arrangement. Your son is entitled to his opinion, Lorenzo replied. But Evelyn isn't up for discussion. We're here to talk about territories and compensation, nothing else. Everything is up for discussion when you unilaterally change the terms of our partnership. Victor gestured to the table, where maps were spread out, shipping routes, warehouse locations, zones of control marked in different colors. You brought a civilian to our gala. You made a public spectacle. You created a vulnerability where none existed before. Evelyn isn't a vulnerability. Prove it. Dimitri stepped forward, his attention fixed on Evelyn with predatory focus. You say she's an asset, not a liability. Show us. Lorenzo's hand tightened on Evelyn's back, but his voice stayed level. What exactly are you suggesting? A test. Nothing violent. Dimitri's smile suggested otherwise. Just a conversation. Between me and your pretty secretary, let's see if she's as strong as you think. Every instinct in Evelyn's body screamed danger. But she thought about what Lorenzo had said, about not being a weakness, about being a strength. And she thought about the choice she'd made last night, to be part of this world completely. Fine, she said. Evelyn? Lorenzo's voice held a warning. It's fine. I can handle a conversation. She met Dimitri's eyes. What do you want to know? Dimitri circled her slowly, like a shark testing the water. How long have you worked for Lorenzo? 2 years. And in those 2 years, what exactly have you learned about his business? Enough to know that your family controls East Coast shipping and that you're losing ground to the Chen Syndicate out of San Francisco. Enough to know that you need Lorenzo's connections in Europe more than he needs your port access. Enough to know that this posturing is about ego, not actual business interests. The warehouse went quiet. Even Victor looked surprised. Dmitri stopped circling, positioning himself directly in front of her. "Careful," he said softly. "You're talking about things you don't understand." "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, this whole meeting is theater. Your father brings you to look intimidating, Lorenzo brings me to look vulnerable, and everyone pretends we're negotiating when really this is about whether you can accept that Lorenzo's personal life doesn't diminish his business acumen." My, Victor murmured. "She does have a spine." Dimitri's expression had gone cold. "You think you know our business? You think reading some files makes you an insider?" "I think I've spent 2 years managing Lorenzo's schedule, reviewing his contracts, and coordinating meetings with people who would happily kill him if they thought they could get away with it. I think I know more about how this world works than you give me credit for." "Then you know what happens to people who become liabilities. What happens when enemies decide the best way to hurt Lorenzo is through you." "I know the risk." Evelyn held his stare. "I'm here anyway. Brave or stupid? Maybe both." Something that might have been respect flickered in Dimitri's eyes. Then he turned back to his father. "She's got nerve. I'll give her that." "Nerve doesn't stop bullets," Victor said, but he was looking at Evelyn with new assessment. "However, it does suggest this isn't just some passing fancy. Lorenzo, you're serious about this woman." "I told you I was." "Then we have a problem, because serious means permanent. Permanent means she becomes a fixture in our dealings, and that requires adjustments." Lorenzo moved to stand beside Evelyn, his presence solid and grounding. "What kind of adjustments?" Victor gestured to the maps. "You give up the Baltimore port access. We take over distribution through Maryland and Virginia. In exchange, we guarantee Evelyn's safety. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. She becomes protected under our family's covenant." "You're asking me to give up 30% of my East Coast operations in exchange for protecting what's already mine?" Lorenzo's voice was dangerous now. "That's not negotiation, Victor. That's extortion. Call it what you want, but the fact remains, you brought a civilian into our world. That creates liability for everyone. We need insurance that you won't make careless decisions because you're thinking with something other than your head." Evelyn felt Lorenzo tense beside her, felt the moment hovering on the edge of violence. In the corners of the warehouse, hands moved toward weapons. This was it, the moment where everything could explode. And suddenly, she knew what to do. "Counter-proposal," she said clearly. All eyes turned to her. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable, but she felt his hand brush against hers, not stopping her, just acknowledging. "I'm listening," Victor said. "You're right that my presence creates complications. But you're wrong about the solution. Lorenzo doesn't need to give up territory to protect me. He needs to prove I'm an asset worth having around." She looked at Dmitri. "You said this meeting was theater, so let's make it productive theater. Give us a problem, something you've been struggling with. Let me show you I can contribute." Victor's eyebrows rose. "You want a job interview?" "I want to prove I'm not dead weight." Evelyn kept her voice steady, even though her heart was trying to break through her ribs. "You give us a problem, we solve it, and then we renegotiate from a position of proven value instead of assumed liability." Dmitri laughed, a sharp surprise sound. "You're either very smart or very insane." Again, maybe both. Victor and Dmitri exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. Then Victor nodded slowly. "All right, you want to prove yourself? The Chen Syndicate has been pushing into our territory. 3 of our shipments have been intercepted in the last month. We know they have someone on the inside, someone feeding them information about routes and timing. Find the leak. You have 1 week." "That's a security issue," Lorenzo said. Not something a secretary should be able to solve?" Victor smiled. "Exactly. If she can do it, she's proven herself valuable. If she can't, then we proceed with my original terms. Either way, we get a resolution." Evelyn looked at Lorenzo. His jaw was tight, every line of his body radiating tension. But he didn't say no. Instead, he looked at her, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded. "We'll find your leak," Lorenzo said. "But when we do, we renegotiate everything. Not just Evelyn's place in this arrangement, everything." "Agreed." Victor extended his hand. "1 week, Lorenzo. Don't disappoint me." They shook, and the meeting was over. Lorenzo guided Evelyn back to the car, his hand never leaving her back. Marcus pulled away from the warehouse, to the SUV following close behind. The moment they were away from Pier 47, Lorenzo pulled her against him. "That was the most reckless, brilliant thing I've ever witnessed." "I'm not sure if that's a compliment." "It's both." He tilted her face up to his. "You just bought us time and turned a losing negotiation into a challenge. But Evelyn, do you understand what you've committed to? Finding an informant inside the Rossetti organization in 1 week is nearly impossible." "Nearly isn't definitely." She pulled back enough to look at him properly. "You have resources, contacts. I have 2 years of experience tracking information and connecting dots. We can do this. And if we can't, then we deal with the consequences, together." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was looking for cracks, for doubt. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would need protecting, someone I'd have to shield from the worst parts of my world." His hand cupped her cheek. "Instead, I got someone who walks into warehouses and volunteers for impossible tasks." "Disappointed?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But also," he kissed her, deep and claiming, "also more certain than I've ever been that you're mine." They went back to Lorenzo's penthouse, and for the next 3 hours, they worked. Lorenzo made calls, pulled files, reached out to contacts who owed him favors. Evelyn went through the Rossetti shipment records she'd glimpsed on the warehouse table, cross-referencing them with information she'd absorbed over 2 years of managing Lorenzo's shipping contracts. By 7 p.m., they had a working theory and absolutely no proof. "The leak has to be someone with access to route information at least 3 days in advance," Evelyn said, staring at the timeline spread across Lorenzo's dining table. "That narrows it to maybe 15 people in Victor's organization. Could be more if they're pulling information from multiple sources." Lorenzo was on his laptop, running background checks through databases Evelyn was fairly certain weren't legal. "The Chen Syndicate is sophisticated. They could have multiple informants working together. Then we need to look at patterns. Who benefits? Who has connections to San Francisco?" She pulled up another file. "Wait, look at this. 3 of the intercepted shipments were routed through Baltimore, the port you were supposed to give up in today's negotiation." Lorenzo's head snapped up. "You think this is about more than just stealing shipments?" "I think someone wants you out of Baltimore specifically, and they're willing to frame it as a Chen problem to make it happen. Which means it's not the Chen Syndicate at all." Lorenzo was already reaching for his phone. "It's internal. Someone in the Rossetti family wants to consolidate control, and they're using phantom enemies to do it. Who benefits if you lose Baltimore access?" "Dmitri. He's been pushing to expand enforcement operations, and Baltimore is the perfect staging ground." Lorenzo's expression had gone cold. "If he can manufacture a crisis that forces me out, he positions himself as the solution." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "We just accused the son of a crime boss of sabotaging his own family's operations." "No, we have a theory. We need proof." Lorenzo was already typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "If Dmitri is behind this, he's covering his tracks. But everyone makes mistakes. Everyone leaves a trail." They worked through the night, following digital breadcrumbs and financial records that shouldn't have been accessible. Evelyn learned more about Lorenzo's resources in those hours than she had in 2 years. The hackers he kept on retainer, the law enforcement contacts who looked the other way for the right price, the vast network of information that flowed through his organization like blood through veins. At 3 a.m., they found it. A series of payments from a shell company registered to Dmitri's cousin routed through the Cayman Islands to a known Chen operative. Not enough to prove anything in court, but enough to establish the connection. "He's paying the Chen Syndicate to intercept his own family's shipments," Evelyn breathed, "creating a crisis so Victor has to make concessions. And positioning himself as the strong hand needed to fix it." Lorenzo sat back, his expression grim. which means bringing this to Victor could trigger a civil war. Father versus son, succession crisis, the whole organization fracturing. Or Victor already knows, and this is all a test to see if we're smart enough to figure it out. Lorenzo looked at her sharply. Explain. Victor brought Dimitri to the meeting today. He let his son provoke us, challenge us. But he's not stupid. He knows his own son. What if the leak investigation was never about finding an informant? What if it was about seeing if we could identify the real problem without being told? You think Victor suspects Dimitri? I think Victor wants to know if we're smart enough to navigate family politics. If we bring this to him directly, we prove we can handle the complexity. If we just find some low-level informant to sacrifice, we miss the bigger picture. Lorenzo was quiet, processing. Then he pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. You're brilliant, you know that? I'm learning the game. Fast learner. He kissed her neck. We take this to Victor tomorrow. Show him everything we found. Let him decide how to handle his son. And if he decides to kill Dimitri, then Dimitri should have thought twice before trying to manipulate us. Lorenzo's voice was hard. This world doesn't have room for mercy, Evelyn. Only consequences. She leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. I'm starting to understand that. Bothered? Was she? A week ago, the idea of being complicit in someone's potential death would have horrified her. Now, after warehouses and negotiations and the cold mathematics of survival, she wasn't sure. Ask me again in a year, she said finally. Lorenzo's arms tightened. In a year, you'll be so deep in this world you won't remember what it was like to be shocked by it. Is that what happened to you? No. I was born into this. My father ran an empire, my grandfather before him. I never had the luxury of innocence. He turned her face toward his. But you did. And I'm taking that from you. Every day you stay with me, you lose a little more of who you were. Evelyn kissed him, silencing the guilt she heard underneath his words. Maybe I don't want to be who I was. Maybe I want to be who I'm becoming. And who's that? Someone who doesn't run when things get dangerous. Someone who solves problems instead of hiding from them. Someone who... She paused, making herself say it. Someone who belongs with you. Lorenzo kissed her like she was oxygen, like he'd been drowning and she was air. They made it to the bedroom eventually, clothes discarded in a trail across the penthouse, and Evelyn learned that Lorenzo, after a successful strategy session, was intense and demanding and completely overwhelming. Later, wrapped in sheets that cost more than her monthly rent, she stared at the ceiling and tried to process the last 48 hours. 2 days ago, she'd been having lunch with an old friend. Now she was planning to expose a crime family heir and potentially trigger a succession war. Can't sleep? Lorenzo's voice was rough with exhaustion. Too much adrenaline. Tell me something that has nothing to do with crime families or informants or any of this. Evelyn thought about it. I wanted to be a teacher when I was young. Elementary school. I liked the idea of helping kids learn to read. What changed? Reality. Teachers don't make enough money, and I had student loans. So I became a secretary instead. Efficient, organized, forgettable. She turned to look at him. What did you want to be? Lorenzo's smile was sad. I wanted to be normal, have a normal job, normal relationships, a normal life where people didn't fear me. But that was never an option. My father made sure of it. Do you hate him for that? Sometimes. Mostly I accept it. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. His hand found hers under the sheets. But Evelyn, you still have a choice. You could walk away, find that teaching job or something close to it. Have the normal life you wanted. Is this you trying to push me away? This is me making sure you know the exit is there. Evelyn rolled to face him fully. I don't want the exit. I want this. Complicated, dangerous, morally ambiguous. I want all of it. I want you. Lorenzo pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. Then you've got me, all of me. Everything I am, and everything I've done, and everything I'm going to do, I'm yours, Evelyn Carter, completely. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't dream of safety. She dreamed of power, of standing beside Lorenzo while empires rose and fell, of being exactly where she belonged. She woke to sunlight, and the smell of coffee and Lorenzo already dressed, phone pressed to his ear, looking out at the city with the kind of focus that meant something had changed. He ended the call when he saw her stirring. Victor wants to meet, this morning. Just him. No Dimitri, no security. Private location. Evelyn sat up, instantly alert. He knows. Either that or he wants to know what we found. Lorenzo crossed to the bed, handed her coffee that was exactly how she liked it. We leave in an hour. Dress for business. This is the real negotiation. She showered quickly, dressed in the clothes Lorenzo had provided, and tried to ignore the nerves eating at her stomach. This was it. The moment where they either proved themselves valuable or became liabilities to be eliminated. Lorenzo's car took them to a restaurant on the waterfront. Expensive, quiet, the kind of place where privacy could be purchased. Victor was already there, sitting at a corner table with a view of the harbor. He looked older in daylight, tired in a way that suggested he hadn't slept much either. Lorenzo, Miss Carter. He gestured to the empty chairs. Please, sit. They sat. A waiter appeared, poured water, disappeared without a word. Victor studied them both with those hard, calculating eyes. I assume you have information for me, he said finally. We do. Lorenzo slid a folder across the table. Everything's in there. The payments, the connections, the timeline. You have a leak, but not the kind you thought. Victor opened the folder, his expression neutral as he read. Evelyn watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of surprise or anger. She saw neither, just careful assessment, the kind of look that suggested he was processing information he'd already suspected. My son, he said quietly. You're accusing my son. We're presenting the evidence. What you do with it is your decision. Victor closed the folder, set it aside. Do you know what it's like to build an empire and watch your heir try to tear it down before you're even gone? Neither of them answered. The question was rhetorical anyway. Dimitri thinks I'm weak, Victor continued. Thinks the old ways don't work anymore. He wants expansion, aggression, constant warfare. But that's not how you survive in this business. You survive through careful alliances, through knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. He looked at Evelyn. You understand that, don't you? I'm learning, she said carefully. You're learning fast. Faster than my son ever did. Victor's smile was cold. Which is why I'm going to make you an offer, both of you. Lorenzo's hand found Evelyn's under the table. We're listening. My son is a problem, but he's still my son. I can't eliminate him without fracturing the family. So instead I contain him. Send him to oversee European operations, far away from the American territories where he can do real damage. Victor leaned forward. In exchange, you keep Baltimore. In fact, I'll give you expanded access through Virginia and the Carolinas. All I ask is that this information stays between us. No one else knows Dimitri was the leak. We handle it quietly, internally. And what do we get out of protecting your family's reputation? Lorenzo asked. Protection for yours, specifically for her. Victor nodded toward Evelyn. Official recognition that Evelyn Carter is under Rossetti protection. Anyone who touches her starts a war not just with you, but with my entire organization. That's worth more than any port access, Lorenzo. You know it is. Evelyn felt the weight of the offer. This was more than business negotiation. This was being formally recognized as part of Lorenzo's world, with all the protection and danger that entailed. We need to discuss this, Lorenzo said. Of course. You have until tomorrow evening. Victor stood, leaving the folder on the table. But Lorenzo, understand, this offer expires once. If you decline, we proceed with standard protocols. And those protocols don't include special protections for civilians who get involved in family business. He left, and Evelyn finally released the breath she'd been holding. That was a threat, she said. That was a negotiation wrapped in a threat. Lorenzo was staring at the folder. He's giving us everything we wanted and asking for discretion in return. It's actually a good deal. Except we're covering up Dimitri's betrayal. We're accepting political reality. Victor can't kill his own son without consequences, but he can remove him from power, which accomplishes the same goal. Lorenzo turned to her. The question is whether you're comfortable with it. Being under official protection means being officially part of this world. No more deniability. No more pretending you're just my secretary. Evelyn thought about it, about safety and danger and the careful line between them, about the woman she'd been a week ago and the woman she was becoming. "Accept the deal," she said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. If I'm going to be part of your world, I want the protection that comes with it. And if that means keeping Victor's secrets, that's the price we pay." Lorenzo kissed her, right there in the expensive restaurant with the waiter pretending not to notice. "Then it's done. Tomorrow, you become officially mine, under Rossetti protection, recognized by every family from here to the West Coast. No pressure? None at all." His smile was sharp. "Welcome to the Empire, Evelyn Carter. Try not to get yourself killed." The formal acceptance came through 24 hours later in the form of a dinner invitation that was really a summons. The Rossetti estate, 8 p.m., black tie required. Lorenzo's response had been terse and immediate. They'd be there. Now Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in Lorenzo's bedroom, wearing a dress that cost more than her first car. Midnight blue silk that hugged every curve, with a neckline just low enough to be dangerous. Diamond earrings that Lorenzo had presented to her an hour ago without ceremony. Just a velvet box left on the bathroom counter while she showered. "Stop fidgeting," Lorenzo said from the doorway. He was already dressed, black tuxedo that made him look like he could either run a Fortune 500 company or orchestrate a murder with equal efficiency. Probably because he could do both. "I'm not fidgeting. You've adjusted that necklace 4 times in the last minute." He crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Nervous? Terrified? There's a difference." His reflection smiled behind hers in the mirror. "Good. Terrified means you're taking this seriously. Tonight isn't just dinner, Evelyn. It's a ceremony. By the end of the evening, you'll be formally recognized by every major family on the East Coast as under my protection, which means every enemy I have will be looking for weaknesses." Reassuring. It's meant to be honest. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "Last chance to back out. We can cancel, disappear for a while, figure out something else." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at the man who'd upended her entire life in less than a week. There were shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had, a tension in his jaw that meant he was more worried than he wanted to admit, and underneath it all, something fierce and protective that made her chest ache. "I'm not backing out," she said, "but Lorenzo, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever things get dangerous. Don't shield me from it. I need to see everything, understand everything. If I'm going to survive in your world, I need to know how it actually works." Something that might have been pride flickered in his eyes. "You're going to be magnificent. You know that?" "I'm going to try not to embarrass you." "Impossible." He kissed her forehead. "You could show up in sweatpants and you'd still outclass half the people there. But since you're not—" He stepped back, taking her in fully. "You look like you could burn the world down and make everyone thank you for it." "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth." The Rossetti estate was 40 minutes outside the city, hidden behind gates and security that made Lorenzo's penthouse look unprotected by comparison. They were waved through 3 separate checkpoints, each staffed by men with the kind of cold eyes that suggested they'd killed people and lost no sleep over it. The house itself was massive, old money architecture trying to look respectable while housing anything but. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, art that was probably stolen from museums during various European wars. Evelyn counted at least 20 people in the main foyer alone, all dressed in expensive clothes and watching Lorenzo's arrival with varying degrees of interest and calculation. "Stay close," Lorenzo murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. "Don't drink anything you didn't see poured. Don't accept food from anyone I haven't vetted. And if someone tries to separate us, decline politely but firmly." "You're expecting trouble." "I'm expecting tests. There's a difference." Victor appeared at the top of a grand staircase, playing the gracious host in a way that would have been convincing if Evelyn hadn't seen him in a warehouse surrounded by armed men 3 days ago. He descended with the measured grace of someone who knew every eye was on him. "Lorenzo, Miss Carter, welcome." He extended his hand and Lorenzo shook it with the careful neutrality of someone greeting an ally who could become an enemy with one wrong word. "I'm glad you could make it. Please, come in. We have much to discuss." The dining room could have seated 40 people comfortably. Tonight, it held maybe 20. The Rossetti family and their closest allies, each one representing a different piece of the criminal empire that controlled the East Coast. Evelyn recognized some faces from the gala, others from the dossiers she'd read. All of them were watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and assessment. Victor seated them near the head of the table, a position of honor that was also a position of scrutiny. Evelyn found herself between Lorenzo and a woman who introduced herself as Katerina Volkov, head of the Russian contingent out of Brighton Beach. "So you're the secretary," Katerina said in accented English, her smile sharp. "The woman who caught Lorenzo Vieri's attention. That must be quite a story." "Not really. I filed his paperwork efficiently. Apparently that's enough." Katerina laughed, genuine and surprised. "I like her, Lorenzo. She has spine. That's good. You'll need it to survive what's coming." "What's coming?" Evelyn asked, ignoring the warning look Lorenzo shot her. "The fallout. Did you think the other families would simply accept Lorenzo claiming you without consequence? There will be tests, challenges, people who want to prove you're a weakness worth exploiting." Katerina sipped her wine. "But if you're smart and you're strong, you'll survive, maybe even thrive." Dinner was served in courses, each one more elaborate than the last. Evelyn barely tasted any of it. She was too focused on the conversations happening around her, the subtle power dynamics playing out in every word choice and seating arrangement. Across the table, Dmitri Rossetti sat between his brothers, looking like someone who'd been told to behave and was barely managing it. His eyes kept drifting to Evelyn with something that wasn't quite hostility, but wasn't friendly either. Between the second and third courses, Victor stood tapping his glass for attention. The room quieted immediately. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, we're here to formalize an arrangement between the Vieri and Rossetti families. Lorenzo has brought his chosen partner into our world, and per our traditions, she must be recognized and protected accordingly." He looked at Evelyn, and she felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes following his gaze. "Evelyn Carter, please stand." Her legs felt unsteady, but she stood. Lorenzo's hand brushed hers briefly under the table. Reassurance or warning, she wasn't sure which. "Do you understand what's being offered tonight?" Victor asked. "Protection under the Rossetti Covenant means you're recognized as part of Lorenzo's household. It means harming you is equivalent to harming him, but it also means accepting the responsibilities and consequences that come with that recognition. Do you accept these terms?" Evelyn's mouth was dry. This was it, the moment where there was truly no going back. She could feel Lorenzo's tension, could sense him ready to intervene if she hesitated, but she didn't need intervention. "I accept," she said clearly. "Then let it be known, Evelyn Carter is under the protection of both the Vieri and Rossetti families. Any action against her will be considered an act of war." Victor raised his glass. "To new alliances and old traditions." The room echoed the toast, but Evelyn caught the undertones. Some voices enthusiastic, others merely polite. Not everyone was happy about this arrangement. Not everyone thought she deserved protection. As she sat down, Dimitri's voice carried across the table. "Tell me, Miss Carter, what exactly qualifies you for such an honor? Besides warming Lorenzo's bed?" The room went silent. Evelyn felt Lorenzo go rigid beside her, felt the moment balance on a knife's edge. She could let Lorenzo handle this, let him defend her honor and prove Dimitri's rudeness, or she could handle it herself. "I solved a problem your family couldn't," she said evenly, meeting Dimitri's eyes. "Found a leak in your organization in less than a week. That seems like qualification enough." Dimitri's expression darkened. "You solved nothing. You pointed fingers based on circumstantial evidence." "Did I? Then why are you being shipped off to Europe next month? That's not a promotion, Dimitri. That's exile." She shouldn't have said it. The words were out before she could stop them, and the moment they landed, she knew she'd crossed a line. Dimitri's face went white, then red. His hand moved towards something under the table. A weapon, probably. But his father's voice cut through the tension. "Dimitri, sit down, now." For a horrible moment, Evelyn thought he wouldn't comply, thought this was about to turn into the kind of violence Lorenzo had warned her about. But then Dimitri sat, his jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "Apologies," he said, the word clearly costing him. "I spoke out of turn." "Yes, you did." Victor's voice was cold. And Miss Carter is correct. You are being reassigned to oversee European operations. Consider it an opportunity to prove you can handle responsibility without creating catastrophes. The rest of the dinner passed in strained civility. People made polite conversation, discussed business in careful euphemisms, and pretended the confrontation hadn't happened. But Evelyn could feel the shift, the way people looked at her differently now, assessing her not as Lorenzo's weakness, but as someone who'd just publicly humiliated a Rossetti's son and walked away unscathed. After dessert, the gathering broke into smaller groups. Lorenzo was pulled into a conversation about shipping routes with several of the older men, leaving Evelyn standing near the elaborate bar with a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking. That was either very brave or very stupid, a voice said behind her. Natasha Rossetti, looking elegant in black lace and diamonds. I haven't decided which. Your husband's son insulted me. I responded. Yes, you did, and now Dmitri will spend the rest of his life waiting for an opportunity to repay that humiliation. Natasha studied her with those cold, calculating eyes. Do you understand the enemy you just made? I understand he was already an enemy. I just made it official. Something that might have been respect flickered across Natasha's face. You're learning faster than I expected. Most people take years to understand how this world works. You've grasped it in days. I had good teachers. Lorenzo is teaching you about power. Let me teach you about survival. Natasha moved closer, her voice dropping. Dmitri is dangerous because he's insecure. Men like that, men who feel they have something to prove, they're unpredictable. They take risks that smarter people avoid. Watch your back, Miss Carter. Even in exile, he'll be looking for ways to hurt you. Why are you warning me? Because I like you, and because having you around might actually be good for Lorenzo. He's been alone too long, made too many decisions based purely on logic. You make him human again. That's valuable. Natasha's smile was sharp. But it's also dangerous. Human Lorenzo makes mistakes. Mistakes get people killed. Before Evelyn could respond, Lorenzo appeared at her side, his hand settling possessively on her waist. Natasha, lovely to see you. Lorenzo, take care of this one. She's got potential. Natasha drifted away, leaving them alone in the corner of the crowded room. What did she say to you? Lorenzo asked quietly. That I made an enemy tonight. That Dmitri will come for me eventually. She's right. But Evelyn, Dmitri was already an enemy the moment we exposed him. Tonight just made it personal. He turned her to face him. Are you okay? I don't know. Ask me when we're out of this house. They left an hour later, after more handshakes and careful conversations, and the kind of political maneuvering that made Evelyn's head ache. The car ride back to the city was quiet, Lorenzo's hand holding hers in the darkness, while Marcus navigated through light traffic. I shouldn't have said it, Evelyn said finally. About the exile, that was stupid. That was honest. And it needed to be said. Dmitri was testing you, trying to prove you were weak. You proved otherwise. By making myself a target. You were already a target. Now you're a target who commands respect. Lorenzo pulled her closer. How do you feel? Evelyn thought about it. About standing in front of 20 criminals and accepting protection. About facing down Dmitri Rossetti. About the woman she'd been a week ago versus the woman she was becoming. Powerful, she admitted, and terrified, and like I just jumped off a cliff without checking if there's water below. There's no water, just more cliffs. That's how this world works. It's just falling and hoping you land somewhere you can climb back up from. Reassuring. It's the truth. He kissed her temple. But Evelyn, you're not falling alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together. They spent the night at Lorenzo's penthouse, but neither of them slept much. Evelyn kept replaying the dinner, analyzing every conversation, every subtle threat. Around 3 a.m., she gave up pretending and went to Lorenzo's study, where he was already awake, working on his laptop with the kind of focus that suggested he was planning something. Can't sleep either? She asked from the doorway. Too much adrenaline. He gestured to the chair beside his desk. Come here. I want to show you something. She sat, and he turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a complex web of connections, names, locations, business holdings, all linked together in ways that suggested years of careful organization. This is my empire, Lorenzo said quietly. Every business, every connection, every asset I control. I want you to understand it. All of it. Why? Because if something happens to me, you need to know how to protect yourself, how to access resources, call in favors, navigate the power structures. He pulled up another file. These are my closest allies, people who owe me loyalty. And these, he clicked again, these are my enemies, active threats that could move against us at any time. Evelyn stared at the list. There were at least 30 names, maybe more. This many people want you dead? Want me gone anyway. Dead is just the most efficient method. Lorenzo's smile was dark. Welcome to the life, Evelyn. This is what you signed up for. They spent the rest of the night going through files, Lorenzo explaining the intricate web of alliances and enmities that kept his empire functioning. By the time dawn broke over the city, Evelyn's head was swimming with information. Who controlled what territory? Which families were trustworthy? Where the real power lay beneath the official hierarchies? This is insane, she said, rubbing her eyes. How do you keep track of all this? Practice and paranoia. In this world, the moment you stop being paranoid is the moment someone kills you. He closed the laptop. Coffee? Please. And food. I'm starving. They were in the kitchen when Lorenzo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. Not quite alarm, but close. I need to take this, he said, already moving toward his study. Don't leave the penthouse. Evelyn watched him go, unease curling in her stomach. The call lasted 20 minutes. When Lorenzo emerged, his face was carefully neutral, in a way that meant something was very wrong. What happened? The Chen Syndicate just made a move. 3 of my warehouses in Baltimore hit simultaneously. Millions in inventory gone, 2 of my people dead, and a message spray-painted on the wall. He showed her a photo on his phone. They know about you. The message was simple, brutal. The secretary dies first. Evelyn's blood went cold. They're coming for me. They're trying to provoke a response. This is psychological warfare. Make me afraid for you. Make me make mistakes. Lorenzo was already moving, pulling out his phone again. Marcus, we need full security protocol, now. And get me Victor Rossetti. Wait, Evelyn grabbed his arm. If they're trying to provoke you, then responding is exactly what they want. We need to think this through. They threatened you. There's nothing to think through. Yes, there is. Why now? Why hit Baltimore specifically? They're testing the alliance, seeing if Victor will actually protect me, or if it was all theater. She forced herself to think past the fear, to analyze like Lorenzo had taught her. This is about more than me. They're trying to fracture the arrangement before it's fully established. Lorenzo stared at her. You're saying we don't respond? I'm saying we respond carefully. Use this to strengthen the alliance, not break it. If we go to war immediately, we prove they can manipulate us. If we handle this strategically, we prove we're stronger than they thought. Evelyn, they just threatened to kill you. I know. I saw the message. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against the counter. But I also know that panicking is exactly what they want, so we don't panic, we plan. For a long moment, Lorenzo just looked at her. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her so tightly it almost hurt. I can't lose you, he said quietly. I just found you. I can't. You won't. She pulled back enough to look at him. Because we're going to be smarter than they are, stronger than they expect. And when they come for me, and they will come, we'll be ready. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Lorenzo increased security to the point where Evelyn couldn't go anywhere without at least 3 armed guards. Victor Rossetti called an emergency meeting with the other families, presenting the Chen Syndicate's attack as an insult to their collective authority. And Evelyn spent every waking hour studying everything Lorenzo could teach her about self-defense, threat assessment, and survival. Again, Lorenzo said, watching her practice with the handgun he'd given her. They were in a private range in the basement of his building, just the 2 of them and the sharp crack of gunfire. Center mass, 2 shots. Reassess. She fired, missing the target completely. The recoil still surprised her, made her hands shake. I can't do this. You can. You're just thinking too much. It's muscle memory. Your body knows what to do. My body knows how to file paperwork and make coffee, not shoot people. Lorenzo moved behind her, his hands covering hers on the grip, his chest against her back. Breathe. Feel the weight of the weapon. You're not trying to kill the target, you're just putting holes where they need to be. Simple mechanics. She tried again. This time, one shot hit the outer ring of the target. Better! Again! They practiced for 2 hours until Evelyn's hands ached and her ears rang despite the protection. She still wasn't good, but she was better. Better enough that maybe, if someone came for her, she'd have a chance. On the third day after the threat, Evelyn insisted on going to the office. Lorenzo fought her on it, argued that it was too dangerous, too exposed. But she stood her ground. I can't hide forever, and if I do, they win. They prove I'm a liability that keeps you from functioning. You're not a liability. Then prove it. Let me work. Let me be useful instead of protected. They compromised. She went to the office, but with a full security detail and only for half days. The staff reacted to her presence with varying degrees of shock. Apparently, the story of the gala and the dinner had made its way through the company. Evelyn was no longer just Lorenzo's efficient secretary. She was Lorenzo's woman, recognized and protected, which made her either an object of fascination or fear depending on who was looking. Janet, the front desk receptionist, cornered her in the break room around lunch. Is it true? About the Rossetti family and the protection and everything? It's true. Are you scared? Evelyn considered the question. Constantly, but I'm also... She paused, trying to find the right words. I'm also more alive than I've been in years. Does that make sense? No, but I think I get it anyway. Janet lowered her voice. Is Mr. Vieri treating you well? The question was loaded with concern and probably some gossip gathering, but it was also genuine. He's treating me like I matter, like I'm valuable beyond what I can do for him professionally. That's more than I expected. That evening, Lorenzo took her to a different restaurant, smaller, quieter, with security positioned at every exit. They sat in a corner booth, and for a few hours they pretended to be a normal couple having a normal dinner. They talked about nothing important, favorite movies, childhood memories, the kind of mundane details that felt revolutionary given everything else happening. Tell me something embarrassing, Evelyn said over dessert. About myself? Yes, something humanizing. Something that makes you less terrifying. Lorenzo considered this. I'm afraid of birds. What? Birds. Specifically pigeons. When I was 8, I got cornered by a flock of them in a park. They were everywhere, pecking at bread someone had thrown, and I panicked. Ran straight into a fountain trying to get away. His smile was self-deprecating. My father found it hilarious, called me Pigeon Boy for months. Evelyn laughed, really laughed. The kind that made her stomach hurt. Lorenzo Vieri, feared criminal mastermind, is scared of pigeons. Not scared, cautious around. There's a difference. There really isn't. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Your turn. Tell me something embarrassing. I can't cook. At all. I once tried to make pasta from scratch and somehow set water on fire. That's not physically possible. I know, I did it anyway. The fire department was very understanding. She squeezed his hand. We're ridiculous, you know that? Having this conversation while people are actively trying to kill us. Maybe that's exactly when we need to have it. Remember why we're fighting to stay alive. They were on their way back to the penthouse when it happened. One moment, they were driving through a quiet street, Marcus at the wheel with the security SUV following close behind. The next, a delivery truck ran the red light and slammed into their side. The impact was catastrophic. Glass exploded inward. Metal shrieked. Evelyn felt herself thrown against the seatbelt hard enough to bruise, felt Lorenzo's body shield hers as the car spun. Then everything was noise and chaos and the sharp smell of gasoline. When the world stopped spinning, Evelyn tasted blood. Her ears were ringing. Next to her, Lorenzo was already moving, already pulling a gun from somewhere, his face cut and bleeding, but his eyes focused. Out! Now! His voice was hard, controlled. They're coming. She didn't ask who, just fumbled with her seatbelt, let Lorenzo pull her from the wreckage. Marcus was slumped over the wheel, unconscious or worse. The security SUV had been forced off the road, boxed in by 2 more vehicles, and walking toward them through the smoke and broken glass were 4 men with guns. Lorenzo positioned himself in front of her, his weapon raised. Stay behind me. When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. There's a building 2 blocks north with a red door. My people own it. Get there and call the number I gave you. I'm not leaving you. You are. Because if they get you, I have no leverage. But if you're safe, I can negotiate. He fired twice, dropping the closest attacker. Run. Now. Evelyn ran. She heard gunfire behind her, heard Lorenzo's voice shouting something she couldn't make out. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to help somehow. But she kept running, her heels abandoned somewhere in the wreckage, her dress torn, blood from a cut on her forehead getting in her eyes. The building with the red door appeared like salvation. She pounded on it, gasping, and it opened immediately. Strong hands pulled her inside. Someone was talking to her, asking questions, but all she could think about was Lorenzo, still back there, still fighting. I need to go back, she gasped. I need to… Mr. Vieri gave specific orders. You stay here. You stay safe. The man was older, military-bearing, the kind of person who'd seen combat and survived. We have people heading to him now. But you, Miss Carter, you're our priority. They took her to a safe room in the basement. Concrete walls, reinforced door, enough supplies to survive a siege. Evelyn sat on the cot they provided and tried not to think about all the ways Lorenzo could be dying right now. Tried not to imagine what the Chen Syndicate would do if they captured him. The wait was agony. Minutes stretched into hours. The man who'd let her in, he said his name was Davis, brought her water and bandages and refused to give her any information beyond, "We're handling it." Finally, after what felt like days but was probably only 3 hours, the door opened. Lorenzo walked in, and Evelyn nearly collapsed with relief. He was alive, battered, bleeding from at least 3 different wounds, his shirt torn and his left arm hanging at a strange angle, but alive. She crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around him, not caring about the blood or the pain it probably caused. You're alive. You're okay. Questionable, he said, but his good arm wrapped around her. But alive. Yes. Marcus? Critical, but stable. The attackers are dead. And we have confirmation. It was the Chen Syndicate. Coordinated hit, planned for weeks. He pulled back, his hand cupping her face. You did good. Following orders. Getting to safety. I know that wasn't easy. It was impossible. I wanted to come back for you. I know. But you didn't. You were smart. That's what keeps you alive in this world, being smart when every instinct says to be brave. Davis appeared with a medic who immediately started working on Lorenzo's injuries. The arm was dislocated, not broken. The cuts needed stitches. There was a bullet graze across his ribs that made Evelyn's stomach turn. This is going to hurt, the medic said, preparing to reset Lorenzo's shoulder. Everything hurts. Just do it. The sound of the shoulder popping back into place made Evelyn flinch. Lorenzo just gritted his teeth and endured, his free hand finding hers and squeezing hard enough to bruise. We're going to war, he said quietly, once the medic had finished and left them alone. The families met an hour ago. This attack crossed too many lines. The Chen Syndicate dies for this. Evelyn looked at him, at the man she'd chosen, the man she'd changed her entire life for. When? Soon. Days, maybe. We're mobilizing resources, calling in every favor, preparing for a full assault on their operations. His eyes met hers. And Evelyn, this is going to get bad. Worse than anything you've seen so far. People are going to die. Probably people you know. Definitely people on their side. I understand. Do you? Because once this starts, there's no stopping it, no going back. We see it through to the end, whatever that end looks like. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 2 weeks ago, safe, boring, anonymous. Then she thought about the woman she was now, sitting in a safe house covered in blood and glass, holding the hand of a man who just survived an assassination attempt, preparing to go to war with a criminal syndicate. I'm with you, she said. Whatever comes next, I'm with you. Lorenzo pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. Then let's burn their world down and build something better from the ashes. They spent the night in the safe house, surrounded by armed guards, and the constant hum of encrypted communications as Lorenzo coordinated with his allies. Evelyn watched him work through the pain of his injuries, watched him transform from the man who'd held her in the wreckage to the cold, calculating strategist who was planning a war. The Chen Syndicate has operations in 7 cities, he explained, pointing to a map spread across the makeshift table. San Francisco is their headquarters, but they've been expanding east for the last 3 years. We hit them everywhere simultaneously. Cut off their supply lines, freeze their assets, eliminate key personnel. Victor Rossetti's voice came through the speakerphone, gravelly and tired. My people are in position in New York and Boston. We can move within 48 hours. The Volkov family has assets in Philadelphia ready to deploy, Katerina added from another line. But Lorenzo, we need to discuss the endgame. Are we dismantling the Chen Syndicate or absorbing their territory? Dismantling sends a message. Absorption creates future problems. Lorenzo's jaw was tight. We dismantle. Completely. Anyone who worked for them gets one chance to switch allegiance or disappear. Anyone who chooses loyalty to a dead organization dies with it. The brutality of it made Evelyn's stomach turn, but she understood the logic. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about power, about demonstrating that attacking Lorenzo and his allies came with consequences so severe that no one would dare try it again. What about me? She asked when the call ended and they were alone again. Where do I fit in this? Lorenzo looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. You stay here, protected, safe, until this is over. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that keeps you alive. Lorenzo, no. The word was firm, final. Evelyn, I need you to understand something. What's about to happen isn't a negotiation or a careful political maneuver. It's war, real war, with bodies and bloodshed and the kind of violence that doesn't care about good intentions or courage. You are the one thing in my life I can't afford to lose. So you stay here. You stay safe. And when it's over, when the Chen Syndicate is nothing but a memory, then you can be part of rebuilding what comes next. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that hiding made her useless, made her exactly the liability everyone thought she was. But looking at Lorenzo's face, at the fresh bandages and the exhaustion and the fear he was trying so hard to hide, she understood. This wasn't about not trusting her. This was about him needing to know she was alive so he could function. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. But Lorenzo, you need to promise me something too. What? You come back. I don't care how many enemies you have to go through or how dangerous it gets. You come back to me. Because if you don't, her voice cracked. If you don't, this was all for nothing. He crossed to her, his good arm pulling her against him. I'll come back. I swear it. And when I do, we're getting the hell out of this city for a while. Somewhere warm. Somewhere no one knows our names. Just us. Promises, promises. I mean it. He tilted her face up to his, and she saw the truth in his eyes. After this, after we've ended the threat, I'm going to marry you, properly. Not some strategic arrangement or political alliance. Just you and me and whatever future we can build. Evelyn's heart stuttered. That's either the most romantic thing you've ever said or the worst timing in history. Probably both. He kissed her, gentle despite everything. But I need you to know, in case something happens, in case this goes wrong, I need you to know that you're the only person I've ever wanted forever with. Nothing's going to go wrong. Maybe not. But if it does, stop. She pressed her fingers to his lips. You're coming back. We're getting married, and then we're going to have the most boring, normal honeymoon possible. Those are the facts. Everything else is just noise. The war started 36 hours later with coordinated strikes across 4 cities. Evelyn watched it unfold from the safe house, monitoring news feeds and encrypted communications, while Lorenzo's people gave her sanitized updates. 3 Chen warehouses in San Francisco burned before dawn. Their primary financier was found dead in his Philadelphia penthouse, apparent suicide that was obviously anything but. In Boston, an entire shipment of their product was intercepted by the DEA, tipped off by an anonymous source that everyone knew was Rossetti-affiliated. Lorenzo called when he could, his voice tight with stress and exhaustion. It's working. They're scrambling, making mistakes. We've cut off about 40% of their operations in the first day. How are you? Alive. That's all that matters right now. She heard gunfire in the background, distant but unmistakable. I have to go. I love you. Remember that. The line went dead before she could respond. The second day was worse. The Chen Syndicate retaliated, hitting a Rossetti casino in Atlantic City with explosives that killed 6 people and injured dozens more. They ambushed a Volkov convoy in Brooklyn, killing 4 men and wounding their lieutenant, and they sent Lorenzo a video that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Marcus, Lorenzo's driver, bound to a chair in some anonymous room, beaten badly enough that one eye was swollen shut, but alive, conscious, looking directly at the camera. Lorenzo Vieri, a voice said off-screen, accented and cold. You have taken much from us. Now we take from you. Your driver dies in 24 hours unless you withdraw all operations and pay reparations of $50 million. After Marcus, we come for the secretary. Then you. This is your only warning. The video ended. Evelyn stared at the frozen screen, at Marcus's battered face, and felt something hard and cold settle in her chest. This was her fault. Not directly, but Marcus had been driving because Lorenzo was protecting her. Those people in Atlantic City had died because she existed, because Lorenzo had claimed her and made himself vulnerable. We're working on finding the location, Davis said quietly. We'll get him back. Will we? Or will we find his body in 24 hours because Lorenzo won't pay ransom to people who tried to kill me? Davis didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew Lorenzo would never negotiate with the people who'd attacked them. It wasn't about the money. It was about principle. Pay once, and every enemy would know they could manipulate him through the people he cared about. But Marcus was going to die for that principle. Evelyn made her decision quickly before she could second-guess herself. I need to make a phone call. Private line. Can you give me access? Miss Carter, please, it's important. Davis studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. The moment he left, Evelyn pulled out the burner phone Lorenzo had given her weeks ago, the one she was only supposed to use in absolute emergencies. She dialed a number she'd memorized from the dossiers Lorenzo had shown her, a number she absolutely should not have access to. It rang 3 times before someone answered. Yes? This is Evelyn Carter. I need to speak with James Chen, now. Silence. Then, you're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Carter. Which is it? Desperate. Put your boss on the phone or Marcus dies and this war continues until everyone involved is dead or in prison. Your choice. More silence. Then a new voice, older, measured, speaking with the kind of authority that came from decades of power. Miss Carter, this is unexpected. James Chen? The same. You have courage calling me directly, or perhaps just foolishness. I haven't decided which. Evelyn's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. You have Marcus, Lorenzo's driver. I want him back. Then perhaps you should convince Lorenzo Vieri to meet my terms. We both know that's not happening. Lorenzo doesn't negotiate with people who attack him, but I will. That got his attention. She heard the shift in his voice, from dismissive to interested. You'll negotiate? For what? For Marcus's life, and for an end to this war before more people die. She took a breath. You wanted to send Lorenzo a message. You wanted to prove his attachment to me makes him weak. Fine. You've proven it. Now let's talk about what happens next. You're offering yourself in exchange for the driver. No. I'm offering you something better, a way to end this without losing everything you've built. You're losing this war, Mr. Chen. Your operations are being dismantled piece by piece. In another week, you'll have nothing left to fight with. But if you let Marcus go and agree to withdraw from the East Coast entirely, you get to keep your West Coast operations intact. You get to survive. James Chen laughed, harsh and humorless. You think you can negotiate on Lorenzo Vieri's behalf? You're his secretary, not his proxy. I'm the woman he's willing to go to war over. That makes me more powerful than you think. Evelyn was making this up as she went, operating purely on instinct in the 2 weeks of immersion in Lorenzo's world. You have 24 hours before you kill Marcus. I'm giving you a counteroffer. Meet me. Neutral territory. Just talking. If we can't reach an agreement, you do what you planned. But if we can, if I can give you a way out of this with your dignity and most of your empire intact, then everyone wins. Everyone except me, you mean. I lose the East Coast. You were never going to keep the East Coast. Not against Lorenzo, Victor, and the Volkov family combined. This way you lose one territory and keep your life. The alternative is losing everything and probably dying in the process. Pick. The silence stretched so long Evelyn thought he'd hung up. Then, the Hartley Hotel, downtown. Room 412, 1 hour. Come alone or Marcus dies immediately. I'll be there. She ended the call and stared at the phone in her hand, her heart racing. What had she just done? Committed to meeting with the man who'd tried to have her killed, that's what. Volunteered to walk into what was almost certainly a trap. All to save someone she barely knew and end a war that was probably her fault to begin with. Davis came back into the room. Your call finished? Yes. I need to leave. Now. Miss Carter, that's not possible. Mr. Vieri was very clear. Marcus is going to die unless someone does something. Lorenzo can't negotiate because it shows weakness. But I can. I'm doing this with or without your help, Davis. But it would be a lot easier with it. Davis stared at her like she'd lost her mind. If something happens to you, Mr. Vieri will kill me. Personally? Then make sure nothing happens to me. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you what I'm doing. You can either help or get out of my way. For a long moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he sighed, deep and resigned. 5 minutes to gear up. You wear a vest. You take a weapon. And I'm coming with you, along with a full security team. Those are my terms. Done. The Hartley Hotel was a mid-range business hotel in the financial district, the kind of place that catered to traveling executives and asked no questions. Evelyn walked through the lobby in jeans and a jacket that hid the bulletproof vest Davis had insisted she wear. The gun he'd given her felt heavy and awkward in the small of her back, a constant reminder of how far she'd fallen from the woman who'd filed paperwork and made coffee. Davis and his team positioned themselves throughout the hotel, in the lobby, the stairwells, the floor below. If things went wrong, they'd be there in seconds. That was the theory, anyway. In practice, seconds might not be fast enough. Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway. Evelyn knocked twice and waited, her heart trying to beat out of her chest. The door opened. James Chen was smaller than she'd expected, maybe 5'7", late 50s, wearing an expensive suit and the kind of neutral expression that came from decades of keeping emotions hidden. Behind him, she could see 2 bodyguards and Marcus, still tied to a chair but alive. Miss Carter, punctual. I appreciate that. James stepped aside. Please, come in. We have much to discuss. Evelyn walked into what was almost certainly a trap and tried to look more confident than she felt. The room was standard hotel fare, 2 beds, a desk, a bathroom. Nothing special except for the 3 armed men and the hostage. Is he okay? She asked, looking at Marcus. Alive. Uncomfortable, but alive. Whether he stays that way depends on the next 10 minutes. James gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Explain to me why I shouldn't kill you both and continue this war until Lorenzo Vieri is destroyed. Evelyn sat, keeping her hands visible and away from the gun Davis had given her. Because destroying Lorenzo means going through the Rossetti family, the Volkov organization, and every ally he's accumulated over 15 years. You don't have those resources. Your syndicate is powerful, Mr. Chen, but it's not that powerful. This war ends with you broken or dead. That's mathematics, not opinion. Unless I break Lorenzo first, take away the thing he cares about most. James's eyes were cold. You. Then you make him more dangerous, not less. Lorenzo without attachments is just a businessman. Lorenzo fighting for someone he loves is something else entirely. You've seen what he's done in 2 days. Imagine what he'd do if you actually killed me. Perhaps, or perhaps without you to worry about, he becomes reckless, makes mistakes. Evelyn leaned forward. You don't believe that. If you did, you would have killed me already. But you didn't, because you're smart enough to know that I'm worth more alive than dead. Worth more as leverage than as a corpse. Leverage for what? For the deal I'm offering. You release Marcus. You withdraw all Chen Syndicate operations from east of the Mississippi. You publicly acknowledge that the East Coast belongs to the combined families. In exchange, Lorenzo guarantees your safety and your continued control of West Coast operations. No retaliation, no further attacks. Clean break. James laughed. You're asking me to surrender? I'm asking you to survive. There's a difference. Evelyn kept her voice level, professional, like she was negotiating a business contract instead of a criminal treaty. You came east to expand. It didn't work. The local powers were stronger than you anticipated. That's not weakness, Mr. Chen. That's just reality. Acknowledge it, withdraw with dignity, and you get to keep building your empire where you're actually strong. And if I refuse, then this war continues. More of your people die. More of your operations get destroyed. And eventually, probably within a month, you end up dead or in federal custody because someone decides cooperating with law enforcement is better than dying for a lost cause. She met his eyes. I've read your file, Mr. Chen. You're 62. You've built an empire from nothing. You've survived 3 decades in a business that kills most people within 5 years. That's impressive. That's worth preserving. Don't throw it away because you're too proud to accept a strategic withdrawal. James Chen was quiet for a long time, studying her with those calculating eyes. You're not what I expected, he said finally. I thought you'd be some simpering trophy, hiding behind Lorenzo's protection. Instead, you walk into my hotel room and negotiate like you've been doing this your whole life. I've been doing this for 2 weeks. I'm just a very fast learner. That earned her something that might have been a smile. Lorenzo chose well, better than he probably knows. James looked at his bodyguards, some silent communication passing between them. I'll consider your offer, but I need something more than promises. I need insurance that once I withdraw, the families don't simply hunt me down anyway. What kind of insurance? A treaty, written, signed by all parties, recognized by the council, with penalties for violation that are severe enough to discourage treachery. Evelyn thought fast. I can arrange that, but I need Marcus released first. Show good faith. After I have the treaty in hand, not before. That could take days. Marcus might not have days. James shrugged, a gesture that suggested Marcus's survival meant very little to him. Then perhaps you should negotiate faster. Evelyn weighed her options. She could try to force the issue, but that would probably get them both killed. She could walk away, but then Marcus died and the war continued. Or she could do what Lorenzo had taught her, adapt to the situation and find an angle. 6 hours, she said. Give me 6 hours to put together a preliminary treaty and get the major families to agree to terms. You keep Marcus alive and unharmed. If I can deliver, you release him and we proceed with formal negotiations. If I can't, you do what you were planning anyway. 4 hours. 5. And I need proof Marcus is okay right now before I leave this room. James nodded to one of his guards, who cut the ropes binding Marcus to the chair. Marcus slumped forward, and Evelyn could see the extent of the damage. Broken ribs probably, definitely a concussion, bruises that would take weeks to heal. I'm okay, Marcus said, his voice rough. Tell Lorenzo I'm okay. I will. Evelyn stood, looking at James Chen. 5 hours. Don't make me regret trusting you. Trust is a luxury in our business, Miss Carter, but I'll honor the timeline. For now. She left the hotel room with her heart racing and her hands shaking. The moment she was in the elevator, Davis materialized at her side. What happened? I bought us 5 hours to end a war. We need to call Lorenzo. Now. Lorenzo's reaction to her unauthorized negotiation was explosive. He was furious. At her for putting herself in danger. At Davis for allowing it. At the entire situation that had forced her into a room with the man who'd tried to kill her. You could have died, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. James Chen could have shot you the moment you walked through that door. But he didn't, because I offered him something he wants more than revenge. A way out. Evelyn was back at the safe house, phone pressed to her ear while Lorenzo shouted from wherever he was coordinating the war effort. Lorenzo, listen to me. We can end this. Right now. Today. All it takes is a treaty and some guarantees. Marcus lives, the war stops, and you get everything you wanted. Except I didn't want you negotiating with my enemies. Then you shouldn't have started a war over me. The words were out before she could stop them, sharp and frustrated. You made me part of this, Lorenzo. You claimed me publicly, brought me into your world, made me a target. Well, congratulations. I'm in it now. Completely. Which means I get to make decisions too. Even decisions you don't like. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, quietly, "You're right. I did this. I made you vulnerable and then tried to protect you by locking you away. That's not partnership. That's control. I don't need you to control me. I need you to trust me. I do trust you. That's the problem. I trust you enough to know you'll do dangerous things if you think they're necessary." Like negotiating with James Chen to save Marcus and end a war? Exactly like that. She heard him exhale, long and slow. "Okay, 5 hours. What do you need from me?" Evelyn had already been working on this, sketching out terms while Davis drove her back to the safe house. "I need you to call Victor and Katerina. Get them to agree to a preliminary treaty recognizing West Coast territory as Chen Syndicate domain in exchange for complete withdrawal from the East. I need it in writing, signed by all major families, with enforcement mechanisms severe enough that Chen believes we won't break it the moment he's vulnerable. You're asking for a formal peace treaty between criminal organizations. That's not something that happens overnight. Then it's good we have 5 hours instead of overnight. Lorenzo, can you do this? Can you get everyone to agree?" "Probably. But Evelyn, even if I can, there's no guarantee Chen honors his side. He could take the treaty and keep Marcus anyway. Or worse. He won't. He's smart enough to know that killing Marcus after agreeing to terms would restart the war immediately, and he wants out more than he wants revenge." She hoped she was right. Hoped she'd read James Chen correctly and wasn't sending them all into a trap. "Okay, I'll make the calls. But Evelyn..." "Yes?" "After this is over, we're having a serious conversation about you taking risks without backup." "Looking forward to it." The next 4 hours were a blur of phone calls and negotiations. Victor Rossetti agreed to the terms with surprising speed. Apparently, the Atlantic City bombing had cost him more than he'd let on, and ending the war before it got worse appealed to his pragmatic nature. Katerina took more convincing, wanting guarantees about shipping routes and drug trafficking territories that Evelyn had to improvise solutions for. But slowly, piece by piece, the treaty came together. By the time Evelyn's phone rang with 90 minutes left on the deadline, they had preliminary signatures from every major family and enforcement terms that would make breaking the treaty functionally suicidal. "It's done," Lorenzo said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I'm sending the document now. Once you verify it, get it to Chen. And Evelyn, I know, be careful. Don't trust him. Watch my back. I've got all the warnings memorized. I was going to say I'm proud of you. You did something today that most people in this business couldn't do. You found a way to end a war before it destroyed everything." The words did something to her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you making the calls." "Partners," Lorenzo said. "For better or worse." Definitely worse at the moment, but I'll take it. She met James Chen in the same hotel room, this time with Davis and 4 armed guards visible in the hallway. A show of force that said she wasn't helpless, even if she was still negotiating. James looked at the document she provided, reading through every clause with the attention of someone who'd survived decades by trusting nothing. "This is comprehensive," he said finally. "More fair than I expected. We're not trying to destroy you, Mr. Chen. We're trying to end a war that's costing everyone too much. Take the deal. Keep your empire. Just keep it on the West Coast where it belongs." James set down the document, looking at her with something that might have been respect. "You know what the irony is? If you'd been working for me instead of Lorenzo, I probably would have won this war. You've got instincts most people take decades to develop." "I had a good teacher." "You did. Lorenzo Vieri is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He saw value in you that others missed." James pulled out a pen, signed the document with a flourish. "Tell him he's lucky. Tell him to keep you close. Women like you are rare in this business." "I will." Evelyn gestured to Marcus, still bound to the chair in the corner. "Can we take him now?" "One condition. I get 24 hours to begin withdrawal operations before this treaty becomes public. I need time to inform my people, make arrangements. If word gets out immediately, some of them will do stupid things." "Agreed. 24 hours. But if anything happens during that time, nothing will happen. I'm a man of my word, Miss Carter. When I make a deal, I honor it." He nodded to his guards, who cut Marcus free. "Go, before I remember all the reasons this is probably a mistake." They left quickly, Davis and his team surrounding them as they got Marcus into a waiting car. He was conscious, but barely, his breathing labored and painful. "Hospital," Evelyn said. "Closest one. Move." "No hospitals," Marcus managed. "Lorenzo's doctor. He'll know what to do." They took him to a private clinic in Brooklyn, the kind of place that didn't ask questions about gunshot wounds or broken ribs from interrogations. While doctors worked on Marcus, Evelyn called Lorenzo. "It's done. Marcus is safe. Chen signed the treaty. It's over." The relief in Lorenzo's voice was palpable. "You're sure? He's actually withdrawing?" "He will. 24 hours to get his people organized, then full withdrawal. We won, Lorenzo, without destroying everything in the process." "You won. This was all you." She heard voices in the background, someone calling his name. "I have to go. Final cleanup operations. But Evelyn, I'll be there as soon as I can. Wait for me." "I'm not going anywhere." She spent the next 6 hours at the clinic, watching doctors work on Marcus and fielding calls from various people confirming the treaty details. Victor called to congratulate her, his voice warm with genuine approval. Katerina sent a text that just said, "Impressive, welcome to the family." When Lorenzo finally arrived, it was close to midnight. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the last 3 days, exhausted, battered, running on nothing but adrenaline and caffeine. But he was alive, and when he saw her, something in his expression softened. "Hey," she said, standing from the uncomfortable chair she'd been occupying. "Hey, yourself." He crossed to her, his hands cupping her face like he needed to verify she was real. "You're okay." "I'm okay. Marcus is going to be okay. Everyone's okay. Thanks to you." He kissed her, deep and claiming and desperate. "You terrified me today. Walking into that hotel room, negotiating with Chen like you've been doing this your whole life. I've never been so scared and so proud at the same time." "Get used to it. I'm not planning on being boring and safe ever again." Lorenzo's laugh was exhausted but genuine. "No, you're definitely not boring. Terrifying and brilliant and completely insane, but never boring." They went back to the penthouse that night, finally able to sleep in an actual bed instead of a safe house cot. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time Evelyn closed her eyes, she saw James Chen's face, saw Marcus bound to that chair, saw all the ways her improvised negotiation could have gone catastrophically wrong. "Can't sleep?" Lorenzo asked, his arm tightening around her. "Too much adrenaline still." "Same. My brain won't shut off." He was quiet for a moment. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "How different my life would be if you hadn't come to lunch that day. If I hadn't seen you through that restaurant window and lost my mind. None of this would have happened. You'd still be safe. I'd still be alone. And we'd both be exactly where we were 2 weeks ago." "Bored and unfulfilled?" "Exactly." He turned to face her in the darkness. "I don't regret it. Any of it. Even the parts where I thought I was going to lose you. Because having you, knowing you, working with you, loving you, it's worth every risk, every danger, every moment of fear." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "That's either the most romantic thing you've ever said, or you're delirious from exhaustion." "Probably both. But I mean it, Evelyn. I meant what I said before. When this settles, when we've dealt with the aftermath, and the politics and everything else, I'm going to marry you. Make you officially mine in every way possible." "Is that a proposal?" "It's a promise. The actual proposal will be better. Probably involve a ring and less blood loss." She laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "I'll hold you to that." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in days, Evelyn slept without nightmares. She dreamed of a future where wars ended and treaties held, and maybe, just maybe, she and Lorenzo got to have something resembling a normal life. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee and Lorenzo already awake, sitting at the window with his laptop open and that focused expression that meant he was planning something. "Morning," she said, padding over to him. "What are you working on?" "Damage assessment. The war cost us about 40 million in destroyed assets, but we've recovered most of it through seized Chen operations. Overall, we came out ahead financially, and politically, we've solidified alliances that were shaky before." He looked up at her. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "You, standing there in my shirt, having survived everything the last 2 weeks threw at you, ready to face whatever comes next. That's the win, Evelyn. Everything else is just numbers. She kissed him, morning breath and coffee, and the promise of a future they'd fought for. So what does come next? Lorenzo smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. Now we get married, publicly, dramatically. Make such a statement that no one ever questions whether you belong in my life. You up for that? Marrying you in front of everyone who tried to kill us? Sounds perfectly sane and not at all dangerous. That's my girl. When? Soon, very soon, but first, he stood, pulling her against him. First, I take you somewhere far away from this city and all its complications. Somewhere we can just be Lorenzo and Evelyn, not criminal empire leaders negotiating treaties. Deal? Deal, but Lorenzo, one thing. Yes? Next time you start a war over me, maybe give me advance warning. The learning curve on criminal politics is steep. His laugh was warm and genuine. Next time I'll try to avoid starting wars entirely. How's that? I'll believe it when I see it. They spent the rest of the morning planning, both the escape and the eventual wedding that would cement Evelyn's place in Lorenzo's world permanently. Outside the window, the city continued its rhythms, unaware that a war had ended and a future was beginning. Evelyn Carter, former secretary, current partner to one of the city's most dangerous men, looked at her life and couldn't quite believe how far she'd come in 2 weeks. From filing paperwork to negotiating with crime bosses, from safety to danger to something in between that felt remarkably like home. No regrets? Lorenzo asked, watching her face. Not even one, she said, and meant it. The promised escape materialized 48 hours later in the form of a private jet and no destination announced in advance. Lorenzo refused to tell her where they were going, just handed her a passport and said to pack light. I don't trust surprises anymore, Evelyn said, watching him throw clothes into a bag with the efficiency of someone who'd fled countries before. This is a good surprise, I promise. Your promises lately have involved gunfights and treaty negotiations. Fair point. He stopped packing long enough to pull her close. But this one just involves a beach, terrible Wi-Fi, and absolutely no one who wants us dead. Scout's honor. You were never a scout. Details. They landed in the Maldives 14 hours later, stepping off the plane into humidity that felt like a warm blanket and sunshine that made Evelyn's eyes water. A boat took them to a private island, one of those exclusive resorts where discretion was guaranteed and questions were never asked. Their villa sat over crystal-clear water, all whitewashed wood and expensive minimalism. No phones except the emergency line Lorenzo kept encrypted. No laptop. No connection to the empire he'd built or the world they'd left behind. This is obscene, Evelyn said, looking at the infinity pool that blended seamlessly with the ocean. How much does a place like this even cost? Don't care. Worth every penny to see you relax. Lorenzo was already pulling off his shirt, revealing the healing injuries from the car crash, bruises fading to yellow-green, stitches that would leave scars. Come on, water's calling. They spent the first 2 days doing absolutely nothing productive, swimming in water so clear you could see fish darting between coral formations, sleeping late and then sleeping more, eating food prepared by a chef who appeared and disappeared like magic, leaving elaborate meals and taking away empty plates without ever being seen. On the third morning, Evelyn woke to find Lorenzo already awake, propped against the headboard with that thoughtful expression that meant he was processing something heavy. You're thinking too much, she said, rolling to face him. That's against vacation rules. I'm thinking about the wedding, about what it means to marry you in front of everyone who matters in my world. Having second thoughts? Never. But I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Marriage in my world isn't just about love or commitment. It's political. It's a statement. Every family, every ally, every potential enemy will be watching, judging, looking for weaknesses. Evelyn sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. So we give them something to watch. We make it so public, so definitive that no one can ever question whether I belong at your side. That's what I'm thinking. Big ceremony, all the families present. Show them that you're not just my partner, you're my equal, someone they have to respect. And if some of them don't want to respect me? Lorenzo's smile was sharp. Then they learn the hard way that disrespecting you means going through me. And Evelyn, I'm very good at teaching lessons. They planned it that afternoon, sitting on the deck with the ocean breeze and absolutely no sense of urgency. The wedding would happen in 3 weeks, enough time to make arrangements, but not so long that enemies could organize resistance. The Rossetti estate, because Victor had offered and refusing would be political suicide. Guest lists limited to the major families and their key people, maybe 200 total. I want Marcus there, Evelyn said. If he's recovered enough, he got hurt because of us. He deserves to see that it meant something. Already on the list, along with Davis and the security team, and Evelyn, Lorenzo reached across the table, taking her hand. I want you to invite someone too. Someone from your old life, a friend, family member, whoever matters to you, because this isn't just about my world anymore. It's about both of us building something new. The suggestion surprised her. Everyone from my old life thinks I'm insane for being with you. Are they wrong? Probably not, but I don't regret it. She thought about her few remaining friends. The colleagues who'd stopped calling after she started working for Lorenzo, the families she barely spoke to anymore. There's no one. That's pathetic, isn't it? I'm about to marry you in front of 200 criminals, and I can't think of a single person from my past I want there. That's not pathetic. That's honest. Sometimes building a new life means leaving the old one behind completely. Do you ever miss it? The possibility of normal? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves. I used to. When I was younger, before I fully understood what my father's empire meant, I'd see people my age worrying about college applications and part-time jobs, and I'd think about how much simpler that would be. But then I'd remember, I'm good at this. Building power, making alliances, understanding how the world really works beneath all the pretense. I was built for this life, and now... He squeezed her hand. Now I can't imagine doing it without you. They flew back to the city on a Sunday evening, landing to news that made Lorenzo's expression darken immediately. Victor Rossetti had suffered a heart attack. Serious, but not fatal. He was in the hospital, stable, but unable to handle day-to-day operations, which meant Dmitri was back from Europe, taking temporary control of the family business. This is bad, Lorenzo said in the car from the airport. Victor was our ally. Dmitri is still angry about being publicly humiliated and exiled, Evelyn finished. He's going to use this opportunity to cause problems. More than problems. He's going to try to break the treaty with Chen, restart conflicts, prove he's stronger than his father. And the wedding, Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He's going to see it as an opportunity to make a statement. What kind of statement? The kind that involves disruption, embarrassment, maybe violence. Dmitri doesn't think strategically. He thinks emotionally, and right now his emotions are telling him to hurt us. They spent the next week preparing for multiple scenarios. Extra security at the wedding, contingency plans if Dmitri tried something during the ceremony, alternative locations in case the Rossetti estate became compromised. Lorenzo worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, trying to shore up alliances and anticipate problems. Evelyn threw herself into different preparations, learning everything she could about the families who'd be attending, understanding the hierarchy and politics that would be on display. Katerina Volkov took her to lunch 3 days before the wedding, offering advice wrapped in warnings. Dmitri will try something, she said bluntly. His father's illness has made him bold. He thinks he can challenge Lorenzo and win support from families who resent your presence. Do you resent my presence? Me? No. I think you're good for Lorenzo. You make him human, which makes him easier to work with. But others, Katerina shrugged. Others see you as weakness, as proof that Lorenzo has become soft. Then they're idiots. Lorenzo is more dangerous now than he's ever been, because he has something to protect. Yes. But Evelyn, that sword cuts both ways. You make him stronger in some ways, vulnerable in others. Dmitri will exploit that vulnerability if he can. Let him try. Katerina's smile was approving. Good. That's the right attitude. Just remember, at the wedding, every eye will be on you. Every word you say, every gesture you make, it all means something. Show strength. Show that you belong. Don't give them any reason to doubt. The dress arrived 2 days before the wedding, custom-made midnight blue silk that complemented the earrings Lorenzo had given her weeks ago. Not white, because white suggested innocence and everyone in that room would know better. Not red, because red would be too obvious, too aggressive. Blue, the color of power and trust, and everything she was trying to project. "It's perfect," Lorenzo said when she tried it on for him. "You look like you could command armies."
"I look like I'm about to marry a man with more enemies than friends." Same thing. He came up behind her, his hands settling on her waist as they both looked in the mirror. "Are you scared?" "Terrified, but also—" She leaned back against him. "Also ready. I've spent 3 weeks learning how to survive in your world. Time to prove I can thrive in it." The morning of the wedding dawned gray and threatening rain. Lorenzo took it as a bad sign. Evelyn took it as appropriate atmosphere. They dressed separately. Tradition, Lorenzo said, though she suspected he just needed the time to mentally prepare for whatever Dimitri might attempt. Davis arrived at 10 a.m. to escort her to the estate. "Full security detail," he said. Mr. Vieri insisted. "We have people positioned throughout the venue, electronic surveillance on all entry points, and contingency extraction plans if things go sideways." "You're expecting an attack?" "We're expecting Dimitri to be Dimitri, which means expecting anything." The Rossetti estate looked different than it had during the dinner, decorated for celebration rather than intimidation. White flowers everywhere, strings of lights that would create magic once the sun set, chairs arranged in careful rows that respected family hierarchies and ancient grudges. Evelyn was shown to a preparation room where a team of people she'd never met fussed over her hair and makeup, transforming her into someone who looked like she belonged in this world of expensive danger. She caught glimpses of guests arriving through the window, black cars with tinted windows, security details that were barely concealed, faces she recognized from dossiers and news articles. Natasha Rossetti appeared in the doorway around 3 p.m., looking elegant and somehow sad. "My husband asked me to check on you. He wanted to be here himself, but the doctors—" She trailed off. "He wanted you to know he's honored you chose our home for this." "How is he?" "Alive, angry about being weak, worried about what Dimitri will do in his absence." Natasha came closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful today. My stepson has been making phone calls, having meetings. He's planning something." "Do you know what?" "No, but I know him. He's impulsive and angry and desperate to prove himself. That combination is dangerous." She pressed something into Evelyn's hand, a small knife, barely 3 inches long, but wickedly sharp. "Just in case. It fits in a garter or sleeve. I've carried one to every formal event for 20 years. Never needed it, but it helps me sleep." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive. I'd hate to see Lorenzo destroy my entire family because Dimitri did something stupid." The ceremony was scheduled for 6 p.m. At 5:30, Lorenzo called her private line. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Nervous, armed, ready to stab someone if necessary." His laugh was strained. "Natasha gave you the knife speech, didn't she? She gives that to everyone. But Evelyn, I need you to know, if anything happens, if Dimitri tries anything, you get out. You don't play hero. You don't try to negotiate. You just leave and let me handle it." "We've had this conversation before. I didn't listen then either." "I know, but I had to try." She heard voices in the background, someone calling his name. "I have to go. See you in 30 minutes. Try not to stab anyone before then." No promises. The ceremony space was outdoors, taking advantage of the estate's elaborate gardens. Chairs filled with people who'd killed, stolen, and built empires through violence and strategy. At the front, an officiant who was probably a judge or senator or someone equally compromised. And standing at the altar, looking devastating in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, was Lorenzo. The music started, something classical that Evelyn didn't recognize. She walked down the aisle alone, no one to give her away because she was giving herself, making this choice with full knowledge of what it meant. Every eye tracked her movement. She saw Katerina Volkov smile, saw Victor's sons sitting together, Dimitri in the middle looking like he wanted to set the world on fire. Saw Marcus, still recovering but present, giving her a small nod of approval. And then she was at the altar, standing across from Lorenzo, and nothing else mattered. "You look incredible," he said quietly, meant only for her. "You look like you're about to go to war." "Same thing."
The ceremony itself was brief. Traditional vows modified to avoid any mention of honor or obedience, because both of them knew those promises would be lies. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lorenzo kissed her like he was claiming territory, like he was making a statement to every person watching. The applause was generous but measured. These weren't people who expressed joy openly. They were people who calculated angles and assessed threats. And right now, Evelyn could feel them reassessing her, recalibrating their understanding of Lorenzo's empire to include her presence permanently. The reception was held inside the estate's ballroom, the same space where she'd been formally recognized weeks ago. Dinner was elaborate, speeches were carefully political, and Evelyn kept waiting for something to go wrong. It happened during the toasts. Dmitri stood, glass in hand, his smile sharp and dangerous. "To the happy couple," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "May their union be everything they deserve." The phrasing was pointed, the implication clear. Lorenzo's hand tightened on hers under the table, but his expression stayed neutral. "And since we're celebrating new beginnings," Dmitri continued, "perhaps this is a good time to discuss old endings. Specifically, the treaty with the Chen Syndicate. A treaty that cost the Rossetti family significant territory and influence. A treaty negotiated by," he looked directly at Evelyn, "a secretary with no authority to represent our interests." The room went silent. Evelyn felt every eye shift to her, felt the weight of 200 people waiting to see how she'd respond. Lorenzo started to stand, but she pressed her hand on his arm, stopping him. "You're right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm not authorized to represent the Rossetti family. I never claimed to be. I negotiated that treaty on behalf of Lorenzo and myself, with the understanding that each family would make their own decisions about participation. And yet my father signed it while dealing with health issues that were already affecting his judgment. That hardly seems valid. Your father signed it because it was the smart play, because continuing the war would have cost more than withdrawing. That's not compromised judgment. That's strategic thinking." Evelyn stood, meeting Dmitri's eyes across the room. "But if you want to challenge the treaty, if you think restarting a war with the Chen Syndicate is a better use of Rossetti resources, then make that argument. To your father, who's still alive and still in control of this family. Not to me at my wedding. My father is weak, incapacitated. Someone needs to make decisions. Then make them, but own them. Don't hide behind questioning my authority or attacking Lorenzo's judgment. If you want war, Dmitri, say so. If you want to break the treaty and deal with the consequences, do it. But stop pretending this is about negotiation validity when it's really about your ego." The silence was absolute. Evelyn could see calculation happening behind multiple sets of eyes, people reassessing the situation, choosing sides, deciding how this confrontation would affect their own positions. Victor Rossetti's voice cut through the tension, weak but clear, broadcast through speakers from his hospital bed. "Dmitri, sit down. Now." Everyone turned. On screens positioned throughout the room, Victor appeared, pale, attached to various monitors, but conscious and clearly furious. "The treaty stands," Victor said. "It was negotiated in good faith, signed with full authority, and will be honored. Any attempt to break it will be considered treason against the family. Is that understood?" Dmitri's face had gone white. "Father, you were just embarrassing yourself and this family at a wedding meant to strengthen our alliances. Sit down, shut up, and if you speak again tonight, I will remove you from succession entirely." Dmitri sat. The room remained silent for several long seconds. Then Lorenzo stood, raising his glass. "To Victor Rossetti," he said, "a man who understands that true strength comes from honoring commitments, even from a hospital bed. We all hope for your swift recovery." The room echoed the toast, the moment diffused but not forgotten. The rest of the reception proceeded with careful civility, people making polite conversation while undoubtedly planning how to exploit what they'd witnessed. When they finally left around midnight, Evelyn felt like she'd survived a battle rather than attended a wedding. "That was intense," she said in the car, Lorenzo's arm around her shoulders. "That was Dmitri being Dmitri. But you handled it perfectly. Better than I could have." He kissed her temple. "Everyone in that room now knows you're not just my wife. You're a force in your own right. That's valuable. That's exhausting. Also that." They spent their actual wedding night at Lorenzo's penthouse, too tired for anything more than collapsing into bed together. But lying there in the darkness, wrapped in expensive sheets with her new husband beside her, Evelyn felt something settle, a sense that she'd finally found where she belonged. "No regret?" Lorenzo asked, echoing the question from weeks ago. "Ask me again when Dmitri inevitably tries something else." Fair. The retaliation came 3 days later, subtle but unmistakable. Several of Lorenzo's European contracts were suddenly being challenged by Rossetti-affiliated companies. Shipments were delayed at ports Victor's people controlled. Small disruptions, nothing catastrophic, but clearly coordinated. "Dimitri's testing us," Lorenzo said, studying reports in his study. "Seeing if we'll respond, how hard we'll push back, whether the marriage actually means anything." So we respond. Carefully. Victor's still recovering. We can't go to war with the Rossetti family without fracturing the entire East Coast alliance. He rubbed his face, exhaustion evident. "We need to handle Dmitri without destroying everything we've built." Evelyn thought about the problem, turning it over in her mind. What if we don't handle Dmitri at all? What if we go around him? Explain. Dmitri only has power because Victor is incapacitated. But Victor is still alive, still conscious, still technically in control. What if we strengthen Victor's position instead of weakening Dmitri's? Help him recover faster, give him the resources to reassert control, make it clear that we're allies with the Rossetti family, specifically with Victor, not with whoever's temporarily running things. Lorenzo stared at her. That's brilliant, and completely undermines Dmitri without us having to fire a shot. They implemented the plan immediately. Lorenzo reached out to Victor directly, offering resources, the best doctors, private facilities, whatever was needed to speed his recovery. Publicly, they made statements supporting Victor's leadership and dismissing Dmitri's actions as the unauthorized decisions of someone without actual authority. Within a week, Victor was well enough to attend meetings via video conference. Within 2 weeks, he was back in the office part-time, and Dmitri's brief moment of power evaporated like it had never existed. "You've made an enemy for life," Katerina warned Evelyn over lunch 4 weeks after the wedding. "Dmitri will never forgive you for this. He was already my enemy, at least now he's a powerless one. For now. But men like Dmitri don't stay powerless forever. He'll wait, bide his time, look for opportunities. You need to be ready." "I'm always ready now. That's the cost of this life." Katerina smiled. "You've learned fast. Faster than anyone I've seen. Lorenzo chose well." The months that followed fell into a rhythm. Not quite normal, but functional. Evelyn officially became Lorenzo's partner in all business dealings, her name appearing on contracts and her presence expected at meetings. Some people resented it. Others adapted. A few actually seemed to respect her contributions. She learned to navigate the complex politics of the criminal underworld, to identify threats and opportunities, to make decisions that affected thousands of lives. She learned to sleep despite knowing people wanted her dead, to smile at enemies across conference tables, to live with the constant low-level awareness that violence could erupt at any moment. And she learned that loving Lorenzo Vieri meant accepting all of it, the danger, the moral complexity, the nights when he came home with blood on his hands and secrets he couldn't share. 6 months after the wedding, on a random Tuesday morning, Evelyn woke feeling nauseous. By Thursday, she'd confirmed what she suspected with 3 different tests. She waited until evening to tell Lorenzo, when he came home from a meeting looking exhausted and ready to collapse. He found her in the kitchen, staring at the positive pregnancy test on the counter like it might explode. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" She turned to face him, her heart racing. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Lorenzo's expression went through several rapid changes: shock, concern, fear, and then something that looked almost like joy. "You're sure?" 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow to confirm, but... She gestured helplessly at the tests. "I'm pregnant." Lorenzo crossed to her slowly, his hands settling on her shoulders. "How do you feel about this?" "Terrified. We've been married 6 months, together for barely 8. This world is dangerous, violent, completely inappropriate for raising a child. And Her voice cracked. "I'm scared, Lorenzo. Scared that I'll be a terrible mother, that we'll screw this kid up,
that something will happen and I'll lose you or the baby or both. Those are all valid fears.
But Evelyn, you need to know something. He pulled her close, his hand cradling her head against his chest. I will protect this child with everything I have, with every resource, every connection, every bit of power I've accumulated. Nothing will touch our family. I swear it. You can't promise that. You can't control everything. No, but I can try. And I can make damn sure that anyone who threatens you or our child regrets it for whatever brief time they have left. He pulled back enough to look at her face. Do you want this? The baby, the life, all of it? Evelyn thought about the question, about the woman she'd been a year ago and the woman she'd become, about the life growing inside her and what it meant to bring a child into Lorenzo's world. Yes, she said finally. I want it, all of it, even though it terrifies me. Then we do this together, same way we've done everything else, completely unprepared but figuring it out as we go. The pregnancy changed things in ways both subtle and obvious. Lorenzo became even more protective, increasing security to levels that bordered on suffocating. Evelyn found herself excluded from certain meetings, certain situations deemed too dangerous for someone carrying his child. They fought about it constantly. I'm pregnant, not incompetent, she said after he refused to let her attend a negotiation with a particularly volatile supplier. I can still think, still contribute, still do my job. Your job now is staying alive and keeping that baby safe. Everything else is secondary. That's not your decision to make. The hell it isn't. You're my wife carrying my child, and I will protect you whether you like it or not. The argument escalated until Evelyn threw a book at his head, missed, hit an expensive vase instead, and locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours. When she finally emerged, Lorenzo was sitting outside the door looking exhausted and guilty. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You're right. I'm being controlling and overprotective and treating you like you're fragile when you've proven repeatedly that you're not. Thank you. But, Evelyn, I need you to understand the thought of losing you or losing the baby, it makes me irrational. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. She sat down next to him on the floor, both of them leaning against the wall. We need to find a balance. I need to feel useful, not sidelined. And you need to feel like we're safe. Somehow, we figure out how to do both. They compromised. Evelyn continued working, but with increased security and avoiding situations with high violence potential. Lorenzo tried to include her in decisions rather than making them unilaterally. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. The pregnancy itself was relatively uncomplicated, though the doctor recommended against stress, which was hilarious given that Evelyn's daily life involved managing a criminal empire and navigating deadly politics. At 7 months, Victor Rossetti requested a meeting, just him, Lorenzo, and Evelyn. They met at his estate in the same study where so many negotiations had taken place. Victor looked better than he had in months. Most of his strength returned, but there was something in his expression that suggested this wasn't a social call. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing to chairs. I wanted to speak with you both about succession. Lorenzo's expression became guarded. Your succession or mine? Both, actually. I'm 68, recovering from a heart attack and increasingly aware of my mortality, which means I need to make decisions about who controls the Rossetti family after I'm gone. He looked at them both. Dimitri is my oldest son. By tradition, he should inherit, but tradition assumes competence. Dimitri has proven repeatedly that he lacks the judgment required. What are you proposing? Evelyn asked. I'm proposing an alliance, a formal one, written and binding. When I die, which hopefully won't be soon but is inevitable, control of the Rossetti family will pass to Alexei, my second son. He's smarter, more strategic, actually capable of running an empire. In exchange, I want guarantees that your family... He gestured to Evelyn's visible pregnancy. Your growing family will maintain the alliance, will work with Alexei the way you've worked with me. And Dimitri, Lorenzo asked, will receive a generous settlement and be sent permanently overseas, Europe, Asia, somewhere far from here. He'll live well but without power. It's better than he deserves, but he's still my son. Evelyn and Lorenzo exchanged a look. This was huge. A complete restructuring of East Coast power dynamics. based on trusting that they'd honor a deal with someone who wasn't even in power yet. "We need time to discuss this," Lorenzo said. "Of course, but not too much time. My health is improving, but it's fragile. I want this settled before something else happens." They discussed it for 3 days, weighing pros and cons, considering angles and implications. Finally, they agreed. The formal treaty was signed 2 weeks later, with representatives from all major families present as witnesses. Dmitri was notably absent. He'd already left for Singapore, accepting his exile with whatever grace he could muster. "That's one less enemy to worry about," Evelyn said as they left the signing. "One less immediate threat," Lorenzo corrected. "Dmitri will always be out there, always looking for an angle. But at least now he's looking from very far away." The baby came 3 weeks early, on a Wednesday morning that started with Evelyn's water breaking all over Lorenzo's expensive office carpet. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and panic, and Lorenzo holding her hand while looking absolutely terrified. Their daughter was born just after midnight, 6 pounds, healthy lungs, perfect in every way that mattered. "She's beautiful," Lorenzo said, holding her with the careful terror of someone who'd never held an infant before. "She looks like you." "She looks like a tiny, angry raisin," Evelyn said, exhausted but smiling. "But yes, she's beautiful." They named her Sofia, after Lorenzo's mother. Sofia Vieri, born into a world of danger and power and absolutely no illusion of normalcy. The first 3 months were brutal. Evelyn had read about sleep deprivation, but reading about it and living it were completely different experiences. She existed in a fog of feeding schedules and diaper changes, and the constant low-level panic that she was doing everything wrong. Lorenzo was surprisingly good at it, patient with Sofia in ways he never was with business associates, willing to wake up at 3 a.m. for feedings, actually reading parenting books and implementing strategies. "You're a natural," Evelyn said one night, watching him rock Sofia back to sleep. "I'm terrified and faking it, but she doesn't know that yet." Security around this penthouse had increased to absurd levels. Armed guards on every floor, surveillance that covered every angle, protocols for emergencies that Evelyn tried not to think about too hard. Because thinking about them meant acknowledging that their daughter was already a target, already someone enemies might use to hurt Lorenzo. The first real threat came when Sofia was 4 months old. An attempted kidnapping, stopped by security before it got close. The would-be kidnappers were dealt with quickly and permanently. Lorenzo didn't tell Evelyn the details, but she saw the haunted look in his eyes and knew it had been bad. "We can't live like this," she said that night, both of them watching Sofia sleep in her crib. "We can't raise her in a fortress, surrounded by guards and constant fear." "What's the alternative?" "I don't know, but there has to be something between this and pretending the danger doesn't exist." They talked about it for weeks, exploring options, moving to a more secure location, leaving the city entirely, building something different, some version of Lorenzo's empire that didn't require constant vigilance. The solution came from an unexpected source. James Chen, the man Evelyn had negotiated with to end the war, reached out through intermediaries. He was retiring, stepping back from active operations, and wanted to make peace with old enemies before disappearing entirely. The meeting happened in a neutral restaurant, just the 4 of them: Lorenzo, Evelyn, James, and his daughter, who was taking over his operations. "I wanted to thank you," James said to Evelyn. "That treaty you negotiated probably saved my life. Gave me a way out before I self-destructed." "You're welcome, I think. And I wanted to offer something in return, a gift for the baby, if you'll accept it." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was documentation for a trust fund worth more than Evelyn had earned in her entire life. "This is too much," Lorenzo said. "It's investment. Your daughter represents the next generation. If we're smart, we make sure the next generation has reasons to maintain peace rather than restart wars." James looked at them both. "I don't have grandchildren, probably never will. Let me do this. Let me invest in a future where kids like Sofia don't grow up surrounded by violence." They accepted, and it sparked an idea. Over the next 6 months, Lorenzo and Evelyn worked with the major families to establish something unprecedented: a fund for the next generation. Money set aside for education, security, opportunities. An investment in the future that gave everyone a stake in maintaining stability. It wasn't perfect. It didn't solve all the problems or eliminate all the dangers. but it was something, a foundation for building a world slightly less violent than the one they'd inherited. Sophia's first birthday party was held at the penthouse, attended by an absurd mix of dangerous criminals and their families. Victor Rossetti came, looking frail but happy. Katerina brought her grandson, who was terrorizing the other toddlers with aggressive sharing of toys. Even Marcus was there, fully recovered and back to work, holding Sophia with surprising gentleness. "We did it," Lorenzo said quietly, watching the room. "We survived, built something, created a future." "We're still surviving," Evelyn corrected. "This doesn't end. We just get better at managing it. Optimistic as always. Realistic. There's a difference." She looked at their daughter, currently being passed between various dangerous people like the world's most high-stakes game of hot potato. "But Lorenzo, even with all the fear and danger and complete insanity of our life, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back to safe and boring. This is where I belong." "With me?" "With you. In this ridiculous, violent, completely inappropriate life we've built." She leaned against him. "So yes, no regrets. Not even one." Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask questions, Evelyn would struggle to explain how her parents met. The true story involved restaurants and warehouses and treaty negotiations that no child should hear about, so she simplified it. "Your father saw me having lunch one day and decided he couldn't live without me. So he walked over and changed my entire life." "That's romantic," Sophia said, with the confidence of someone who didn't understand the full implications. "That's one word for it," Lorenzo muttered. But watching their daughter grow, smart, strong, completely unafraid of the world despite all its dangers, Evelyn thought maybe it was romantic after all, in a twisted, violent, completely unconventional way. They'd built an empire together, not just Lorenzo's criminal organization, but something bigger. A partnership that had survived assassination attempts and wars, and the daily grind of maintaining power in a world designed to tear it away. The threats never fully disappeared. There were always new enemies, new challenges, new reasons to be afraid. But Evelyn had learned to live with fear, to function despite it, to build a life in the spaces between dangers. She'd also learned that love in this world looked different than the fairy tales promised. It looked like Lorenzo checking security systems before bed, like Evelyn learning to shoot accurately enough to protect their family, like both of them making hard decisions about who lived and who died, then coming home to read bedtime stories to their daughter. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even particularly healthy, but it was theirs, built from nothing but attraction and bad decisions and the stubborn refusal to give up when things got hard. On their 5th anniversary, Lorenzo took Evelyn back to the restaurant where it had all started. The same bistro, the same overpriced food, the same table where he'd found her with Marcus all those years ago. "Do you remember what I said that day?" he asked over dessert. "You said a lot of things, most of them threatening. I said being with me would mean being a target, that loving me was dangerous. You weren't wrong." "No, but I was wrong about something else. I thought you'd be my weakness, something enemies could exploit, something that would make me vulnerable." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Instead, you became my strength. The reason I'm better at this, smarter at this, more effective at this than I ever was alone." That's either very romantic or very concerning. Probably both. His smile was the one she loved, slightly dangerous, completely honest. "But Evelyn, I need you to know, everything we've built, everything we've survived, everything we're going to face, I couldn't do any of it without you. You're not just my wife or my partner. You're the reason any of this matters." Evelyn looked at the man who'd upended her entire life with a jealous confrontation in a crowded restaurant, who'd pulled her into a world of violence and power and constant danger, who'd given her a daughter and an empire and a purpose she'd never imagined. "I love you," she said. "Even though you're difficult and controlling and you started a war because you saw me holding hands with an old friend. I love you too. Even though you're reckless and stubborn and you negotiated with my enemies without permission. We're a disaster. We're perfect." They weren't perfect. They were complicated and flawed and constantly navigating dangers that would terrify normal people. But they were together, and they were surviving, and they'd built something that mattered from nothing but bad decisions and good timing. And sometimes, Evelyn thought, that was better than perfect anyway.